The text message from my sister arrived just as I was finishing up at the salon. Family dinner tonight. Dwayne and Paige will be there. No excuses this time. My stomach clenched. I'm Madeline, and 3 years ago, my husband of 23 years left me for my niece. Yes, you read that right. My niece Paige, the same girl who used to beg me to braid her hair and make her chocolate chip pancakes on Sunday mornings. Mom, we don't have to go, Claire said, looking up from her wedding magazine. My daughter had stopped by the salon during her lunch break, supposedly to discuss centerpieces, but really to check on me. She'd been doing that a lot lately. No, sweetie, we're going. I set down my phone with more force than necessary. I won't let them think they've won. Claire reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. You're stronger than I am. I can barely look at them without wanting to throw something. Trust me, I've imagined throwing plenty of things. I managed to smile. Speaking of throwing things, how's the wedding planning coming along? Good, except... Claire bit her lip. Aunt Susan called. She's insisting Paige should be invited. The familiar anger bubbled up inside me. Absolutely not. That woman is not coming anywhere near your wedding. That's what I told her. But then she started crying about family unity and second chances. Second chances? I laughed bitterly. Like the second chance Dwayne gave himself with a 20-something version of me? The bell above the salon door chimed, and my best friend Celeste walked in, taking one look at our faces before announcing, well, this calls for wine. It's 2 p.m, I protested. And you're about to have dinner with your ex-husband and his child bride. I'd say that qualifies as wine o'clock. She pulled a bottle from her oversized purse. I keep this for emergencies. 3 hours and several glasses later, we pulled up to my sister Susan's house. Claire squeezed my arm before we walked in. Remember what Celeste said. We're here to show them we're unbothered. The moment we stepped inside, I heard Paige's laugh. That artificial, too loud sound that always reminded me of wind chimes in a storm. She was perched on the arm of Dwayne's chair, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Madeline! Susan rushed over, hugging me too tightly. I'm so glad you came. We've missed you at these gatherings. Well, I've been busy. I forced a smile. The salon's doing really well. Oh, that's nice. Susan's eyes darted to where Dwayne and Paige sat. Dwayne's firm just landed another major client, and Paige has been doing amazing work with her interior design business. How wonderful for them. I headed straight for the wine. Dinner was excruciating. Every time Paige opened her mouth, it was to mention another luxury vacation or expensive purchase. Dwayne sat there beaming at her like she was dispensing pure wisdom instead of just flaunting his money. Claire, honey, Paige suddenly turned her attention to my daughter. I hear you're planning a June wedding. You know, I have some amazing contacts in the industry. I'd love to help. I nearly choked on my wine. Claire's knuckles went white around her fork. That's very kind, Claire managed. But we've got it handled. Oh, but you simply must let me help. Paige's smile didn't reach her eyes. After all, we're family, and I do know all the best people. I'd hate for anything to go wrong. The threat in her voice was subtle but clear. I set down my glass before I could throw it. Actually, Paige, I said sweetly, I think you've helped our family quite enough already. The table went silent. Dwayne cleared his throat. Madeline, no, it's fine. Paige's laugh tinkled through the tension. I understand Madeline's still adjusting, but don't worry, I'll be seeing everyone very soon. She winked at Claire, who looked like she might be sick. As we drove home later, Claire was unusually quiet. Mom, she finally said, I have a bad feeling about this. Me too, sweetie. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. Me too. But I had no idea just how right we both were, or how much that dinner would set in motion the events that would change everything. The morning of Claire's wedding dawned perfect, too perfect. As I helped her into her dress, that nagging feeling from the family dinner 6 months ago still haunted me. You look absolutely beautiful, I whispered, fighting back tears as I adjusted her veil. Mom, don't cry or I'll start crying, and Celeste will kill us both if we ruin our makeup. Claire squeezed my hands, her own eyes glistening. A knock at the door made us both jump. Celeste poked her head in. Everything okay in here? The photographer's ready for... Oh my God, what did I say about crying? We're not, Claire and I said in unison, frantically fanning our faces. Good, because Owen's already emotional enough for everyone. That boy's been pacing the garden for an hour. Celeste paused, her expression turning serious. Also, there's something you should know. Before she could finish, the door burst open. Paige swept in wearing a white dress that could easily be mistaken for a wedding gown. Surprise! She threw her arms wide. I just couldn't miss my favorite cousin's big day. Claire's face went pale. You weren't invited. Oh, please, we're family, and look what I brought. Paige held up a crystal bottle. The most expensive champagne money can buy. We simply must have a toast before the ceremony. Get out. My voice was ice. Now. Make me. Paige's smile turned cruel. I have every right to be here, unless you want to cause a scene and ruin Claire's special day. I started forward, but Celeste grabbed my arm. Not worth it, she muttered. Fine. Paige set down the champagne. I'll just go find my seat, front row naturally. After all, I am the bride's only cousin. The moment she left, Claire collapsed into a chair. Mom, I can't do this. Not with her here. Yes, you can. I knelt beside her. This is your day. Don't let her take it from you. The ceremony started beautifully. Owen's face when he saw Claire walking down the aisle made my heart swell. But halfway through their vows, I heard it. Paige's distinctive laugh, loud and deliberate. The minister paused. Claire's hands trembled in Owen's. Sorry, Paige called out. Just so touching. She continued to make small disruptions. A cough here, a whispered comment there. Each time, Claire's shoulders tensed more. Then came the ring exchange. As Owen reached for Claire's ring, Paige suddenly lurched forward, accidentally bumping the best man. The ring went flying, landing in a decorative fountain with a splash. Oh no! Paige gasped dramatically. How clumsy of me! Chaos erupted. The best man rolled up his sleeve to fish for the ring. Guests started murmuring. Claire looked ready to cry. Wait, I called out. I slipped off my own wedding ring, the one I'd kept all these years, planning to give to Claire someday anyway. Use this for now. Owen shot me a grateful look and slipped it onto Claire's finger. The ceremony continued, but the damage was done. The perfect moment was broken. At the reception, Paige wasn't finished. She grabbed the microphone during the toasts. I'd like to say something about love, she slurred, clearly drunk. About how sometimes it comes when you least expect it, like when your much older husband realizes his niece is his soulmate. Owen's brother tackled the DJ booth and cut the sound. But Paige kept going, her voice carrying across the stunned crowd. And sometimes weddings don't last. Just ask Madeline. Or better yet, ask Dwayne. He's right here. Stand up, honey. Tell everyone how you upgraded. Security finally removed her, but she was laughing the whole way out. See you all at the next family dinner, she called over her shoulder. Later that night, after we'd salvaged what we could of the reception, I found Claire crying in the bathroom. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, I whispered, holding her close. Why does she hate us so much, Mom? What did we ever do to her? I had no answer. But as I helped Claire fix her makeup one last time, something inside me hardened. Paige had crossed a line, and I was done playing nice. You know what? I said, watching Claire and Owen drive away to their honeymoon. It's time someone taught that girl about consequences. Celeste raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, I said slowly, that revenge is a dish best served with a bow on top. I didn't know exactly what form my revenge would take yet, but watching Paige stumble to her car, still wearing that smug smile, I knew one thing for certain. She was about to learn that karma has a way of coming back around, and I was going to help it along. Look what I found. Claire spread old photos across my kitchen table a week after returning from her honeymoon. Her eyes were still red from crying about the wedding video, which had captured every one of Paige's disruptions in HD glory. Where did these come from? I picked up a photo of Paige at 16, posing in my garden. Owen and I were cleaning out Grandma's attic. There's a whole box. Claire pulled out another picture. Remember this? When Paige begged you to host her sweet 16 because her mom wouldn't? The memory hit hard. I spent 3 weeks planning that party, made her favorite strawberry cake from scratch, and now we know why she really wanted it here. Claire's voice turned bitter. She held up another photo, Paige making eyes at Dwayne across the party table. She was already plotting. What else is in that box? We spent the next hour discovering Paige's careful documentation of her obsession with my ex-husband. Photos, diary entries, even old receipts from coffee shops where she'd accidentally run into him. She planned this for years, I whispered, feeling sick. right under our noses. The doorbell rang, making us both jump. It was Rodney, our family lawyer and friend, holding a manila envelope. "You're not going to believe what crossed my desk today," he said, settling into a chair. "Dwayne's trying to buy the old Harrison property." "The one by the lake?" I sat up straighter. "But that's been in Celeste's family for generations." "Exactly. And guess who's pushing hard for it? Paige has been calling the office daily, claiming it's her dream home." Claire snorted. "More like she's desperate to get into the country club next door. They rejected her membership application twice." Rodney spread out some documents. "Here's the interesting part. The property has some unique deed restrictions. The original owner was big on community service, made it a condition of ownership." Something clicked in my mind. "Tell me more about these conditions." "Monthly volunteer work, regular community engagement, annual charitable contributions." He smiled. "Not exactly Paige's style." "No," I said slowly, an idea forming. "But it could be." Claire leaned forward. "Mom, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about how much Paige wants that house, and how interesting it would be if someone else bought it first." Rodney raised an eyebrow. "You don't have that kind of money, Madeline." "No, but I have something better." I pulled out my phone, dialing Celeste. "Hey, remember how you said you owed me for covering your salon shifts last month? I need a favor." Over the next hour, a plan took shape. Celeste agreed to sell me the property at a fraction of its value. Consider it payback for 20 years of friendship, with one condition: I had to keep it in the family. "Perfect," I said, "because I'm planning to give it away." "To Paige?" Claire looked horrified. "Eventually. But first, we're going to make her earn it." I turned to Rodney. "How creative can we get with deed restrictions?" His grin was answer enough. Later that evening, after Claire and Rodney left, I sat alone looking through more photos. One caught my eye, Paige at 12, helping me plant roses. She was smiling, genuinely smiling, not that fake laugh she used now. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "Paige is devastated about the house. Someone outbid them. She's been crying all day." I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I felt something unexpected: hope. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just about revenge anymore. Celeste called next. "The papers are ready. Are you sure about this? It's a lot of money to tie up in a lesson." "It's not just about the money," I replied. "It's about showing her actions have consequences. But also what? Also about giving her a chance to be the person she used to be, before all this." "You're a better person than me," Celeste sighed. "I just want revenge." "Oh, don't worry," I said, picking up the photo of teenage Paige making eyes at my husband. "There will be plenty of that, too." I started making a list of conditions for the deed, each one designed to challenge Paige's entitled worldview, each one a step toward either redemption or humiliation. Her choice. "Time to learn," I whispered to the photo, "that some things can't be bought. Some things have to be earned." And I was going to make her earn every single inch of that property, one humbling condition at a time. "These conditions are genius," Rodney said, reviewing the document I'd drafted. We were sitting in his office, surrounded by legal papers and coffee cups. "But are you sure you want to make them this intense?" "Read them again," I insisted, out loud. He adjusted his glasses. "Condition 1. Monthly volunteer work at the local women's shelter, minimum 20 hours. Condition 2. Weekly cooking classes at the community center, teaching basic skills to underprivileged youth. The same center where she mocked the staff last Christmas," I added. Condition 3. Regular participation in neighborhood cleanup initiatives. Condition 4. Annual donation of 15% of household income to local charities." He looked up. "You know Dwayne's gonna hate that last one." "That's the point. Hit them where it hurts, their precious image and their wallet." The door opened and Claire walked in with Owen. "Did you add the one about the garden?" Condition 5, Rodney continued. "Maintain and expand the existing community garden, including weekly sessions teaching local children about sustainable growing practices." "Perfect." Claire smiled grimly. "Paige hates getting her hands dirty. Remember when she complained about breaking a nail at Grandma's funeral?" Owen whistled. "This is either going to break her or make her a better person." "Win-win," I said. Rodney shuffled the papers. "There's just one problem. How are we going to ensure she actually does these things? She could just fake the documentation. Already handled. I pulled out my phone. I've got commitments from every organization involved. They'll report directly to you as the executor. Plus, I've arranged for local news coverage of the generous young socialite giving back to her community. She'll hate that, Claire grinned. She only likes press she can control. Exactly. And here's the kicker. If she fails to meet any condition, even once, the property reverts to a community trust. No refunds, no appeals. Rodney let out a low whistle. You've thought of everything. Almost. I reached into my bag and pulled out an ornate box. This is how we'll present the deed. It belonged to my grandmother. Paige always coveted it. Along with everything else that wasn't hers, Claire muttered. I opened the box, revealing the velvet interior. The deed goes here, along with photos documenting her, let's call them, greatest hits. The time she crashed cousin Sarah's baby shower. The Christmas she announced her engagement to Dwayne during my mother's cancer recovery celebration, the wedding video. Brutal, Owen said admiringly. She needs to understand why this is happening. I closed the box carefully. Each photo comes with a corresponding condition. Want to avoid the women's shelter? Here's you mocking domestic violence survivors at the fundraiser last year. Don't like teaching kids? Here's you making fun of the community center's after-school program. Mom, Claire said softly, this is brilliant, but are you sure you're ready for the fallout? The fallout's already happened, sweetheart. She made sure of that. This is about consequences. Rodney started preparing the final paperwork. When do you want to do this? Their anniversary party is next weekend. Susan's hosting again. Perfect timing, Claire said. She's been bragging about it for months. All her society friends will be there. Speaking of society, Owen added, I talked to my sister at the country club. They're planning to reject Paige's membership application again next week. She'll be desperate for a win. I placed the deed in the box, along with the carefully selected photos. Then let's give her one, with strings attached. You know, Rodney said, watching me arrange everything, this could backfire. She might rise to the challenge, become a better person, and end up with a beautiful lakefront property. That's not backfiring, I replied. That's the best possible outcome. Either way, she learned something about karma. Claire helped me tie a perfect bow around the box. What if she refuses? Then she proves to everyone exactly who she is, and that property she's been dreaming of becomes a community center named after her grandmother, the woman whose funeral she skipped for a spa day. As we finished the preparations, my phone buzzed with a text from Susan. Paige is inconsolable about losing the house, says her life is ruined. Please come to the anniversary party. She needs all her family around her. I showed the message to Claire, who rolled her eyes. Classic Paige, making everything about her. Don't worry, I said, closing the ornate box with a satisfying click. She's about to get exactly what she deserves, one way or another. Looking at that box, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction, anticipation, and something else. Maybe hope. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone. Sometimes it's about forcing them to become better than they are. I found something you need to see. Celeste burst into my salon after closing, waving her phone. Remember Tommy from the country club? He just sent me these. I peered at the screen. Photos of Paige, much younger, working at what looked like a soup kitchen. Another showed her reading to elderly patients in a hospital. That's not possible, I said. Paige would never. It was before Dwayne, Celeste explained. Tommy says she used to volunteer there every weekend. Look at the dates. She stopped right around the time she started pursuing my husband. The realization hit hard. So she wasn't always like this. There's more. Celeste scrolled through her phone. According to Tommy, she was studying to be a social worker before she dropped out to become an interior designer. She made air quotes with her fingers. What happened to her? I whispered. The bell above the door chimed. Claire walked in with a stack of papers. Mom, I've been doing some digging. You won't believe. Let me guess, I interrupted. Paige used to be a decent person? How did you know? I pointed to Celeste's phone. We're just finding out ourselves. Keep going. Claire spread the papers on my styling station. These are her college transcripts, straight A's in social work courses, letters of recommendation from professors. She was even up for a scholarship to study trauma counseling. Until Dwayne, I said. Until Dwayne, Claire confirmed. It's like she became a completely different person. Celeste sat down heavily. Maybe your revenge plan isn't just about punishment. Maybe it's about reminding her who she used to be. The door chimed again. This time it was Owen, looking troubled. I just ran into Dwayne at the coffee shop. You need to hear this. We gathered around as Owen recounted the conversation he'd overheard between Dwayne and his business partner. He's losing money, Owen explained. Bad investments, market downturns. That's why they wanted the lake house so badly. It's one of the few properties in the area still guaranteed to appreciate. And now they can't have it, I said. There's more. I heard Paige crying in the bathroom. She was on the phone with someone, saying she feels trapped. Said she's tired of pretending to be something she's not. The salon fell silent as we absorbed this information. Mom, Claire said slowly, are we the bad guys here? No, Celeste cut in. Paige made her choices. But maybe... She glanced at the ornate box sitting on my desk. Maybe this is a chance to help her make better ones. I picked up one of the old photos of Paige at the soup kitchen. Her smile was genuine, her eyes bright with purpose. So different from the artificial laugh and calculated gestures she used now. We need to modify the conditions, I said suddenly. What? Why? Claire looked alarmed. After everything she did? Not remove them, enhance them. Instead of just volunteering at the women's shelter, she could counsel there. Use that social work training she abandoned. Owen nodded thoughtfully. The community center needs a program director for their youth services. And the garden project, Celeste added, could be therapeutic programming for trauma survivors. Something she actually studied. I started revising the documents, energy flowing through me. We're not just going to make her do good things. We're going to remind her why she wanted to do them in the first place. But what about the revenge? Claire asked. What about consequences for what she did to us? This is the revenge, I replied. Making her confront who she was, who she became, and who she could be. That's a harder punishment than anything else we could devise. And if she refuses? Owen asked. Then she loses everything. The house, her reputation, and her last chance at redemption. But if she accepts... I smiled. She might just save herself. We worked late into the night, refining the conditions. Each task now had a deeper purpose, a connection to the person Paige had once been. The photos in the box weren't just evidence of her misdeeds anymore. They were paired with images of her past good works, a before and after of her soul. As everyone was leaving, Celeste paused at the door. You know, most people would just want to destroy her. Destruction is easy, I said, closing the box one final time. Redemption, that's the real challenge. And if she fails? I thought about the wedding, about all the pain she'd caused. Then at least we gave her a choice. What happens next is up to her. The anniversary party was 2 days away. The trap was set, but now it felt less like a trap and more like a lifeline. Whether Paige would grab it remained to be seen. Susan's house buzzed with activity as caterers rushed around setting up for Dwayne and Paige's anniversary party. I stood in the corner, clutching the ornate box, watching Paige hold court among her society friends. Can you believe someone outbid us on that gorgeous lakefront property? She was saying. Probably some developer who'll ruin the whole neighborhood. Such a shame, one of her friends simpered. You would have been perfect for the country club set. Claire appeared at my elbow. Ready for this? As I'll ever be. I adjusted my grip on the box. Where's Owen? Recording everything from the security camera angle. Rodney's got the paperwork ready. Paige's voice carried across the room. At least we still have the summer house in the Hamptons, though it's so tedious having only one vacation property. Now, Claire whispered, while she's performing for her audience. I stepped forward, box extended. Happy anniversary, Paige. The room quieted. Paige's eyes locked onto the box, recognition flickering across her face. Grandmother's jewelry box. I always loved this. She reached for it greedily. Open it, I said softly. I think you'll find it contains exactly what you deserve. Her fingers trembled slightly as she untied the bow. The lid creaked open, and her expression froze. What is this? She pulled out the deed, then the photos. Color drained from her face as she flipped through them. A gift, I said. The lake house you wanted so badly. It's yours. Her eyes narrowed. What's the catch? Read the conditions. As she scanned the document, her artificial smile slipped. This is ridiculous. Community service? Counseling programs? Teaching? She laughed that tinkling laugh, but it sounded strained. You can't be serious. Very serious. I pointed to the photos. Each condition corresponds to one of your memorable moments. Think of it as karmic balance. Dwayne, she called out, come look at what your ex-wife is trying to pull. He appeared beside her, scanning the papers. His face darkened. 15% of our income to charity? Mandatory community involvement? This is extortion. No, I corrected. This is opportunity. The property you wanted at well below market value. All you have to do is give back to the community you've taken so much from. Paige's hands shook as she came to the last photo, herself at the soup kitchen years ago. Where did you get this? Remember who you were, Paige, before the designer clothes and society parties? That girl wanted to help people. That girl was naive, she snapped, but her voice wavered. That girl was real. I stepped closer, and she's still in there, underneath all this. I gestured to her carefully curated exterior. You can't make me do this. But she hadn't let go of the deed. You're right. I can't make you do anything. But if you refuse, the property goes to a community trust. They'll build a center there, named after your grandmother. You know, the one whose funeral you skipped for a spa day? The room had gone completely silent. Paige's friends watched with undisguised interest as her perfect facade cracked. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Because someone needs to show you that actions have consequences. And because I touched the old photo of her at the soup kitchen. Because I remember this girl, and I think she deserves another chance. This is absurd, Dwayne blustered. We don't need your charity. Actually, Paige cut him off, still staring at the photo. Actually, I want to think about it. Paige. Dwayne looked scandalized. I said, I want to think about it. Her voice was different, harder, more like her old self. I nodded. You have 24 hours. After that, the offer goes to the trust. As I turned to leave, Paige called out, that girl in the photo, she wasn't pretending. I know, I said. That's why I'm giving her one last chance. Claire and I walked out together, leaving behind a murmuring crowd and a very quiet Paige still holding the open box. Did you see her face when she saw the old photos? Claire asked as we got in the car. Yes, for just a moment her mask slipped. Do you think she'll do it? I started the engine, remembering the look in Paige's eyes when she saw her younger self. I think for the first time in years, she's going to have to make a real choice. Not about what she wants to have, but about who she wants to be. And if she chooses wrong, then at least we'll all know exactly who she is. I pulled away from Susan's house. But something tells me that girl from the soup kitchen isn't quite done fighting yet. The call came from Rodney exactly 23 hours later. She's here, with Dwayne, and she's asking for you. I found them in Rodney's office, Paige still clutching the ornate box. She'd stripped off her usual perfect makeup, and her designer clothes had been replaced with jeans and a simple sweater. She looked younger, more vulnerable. I have conditions of my own, she said as I sat down. Dwayne shifted uncomfortably. Paige, we discussed this. No, she cut him off. You discussed. Now I'm talking. She turned to me. First, I want to run the women's shelter counseling program my way. No interference. Agreed, I said, as long as you maintain the required hours. Second, I want to finish my social work degree. The community service hours should count toward my practicum requirements. Rodney nodded, making notes. We can arrange that. And third, she pulled out the photo of herself at the soup kitchen. I want Aunt Madeline to work with me, not supervising, not judging, working alongside me. The room went silent. Even Dwayne looked surprised. Why? I asked. Because, she took a deep breath, you're the only one who remembered who I used to be, and maybe I need help finding her again. Dwayne stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. We don't need this house. We can buy... No, we can't. Paige's voice was sharp. Tell her the truth, Dwayne. Tell her about the failed investments, the mounting debt. Tell her why you've been pushing so hard for this property. He sank back into his chair, deflated. I'll sign the agreement, Paige continued. All of it. But I need to know if you're doing this just to punish me, or if you actually believe I can change. I studied her face. No artificial smile, no calculated charm. Just raw honesty. Okay, I said. Partners. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Paige threw herself into the conditions with an intensity that surprised everyone. She started at the women's shelter, initially met with skepticism by the staff who remembered her previous behavior. "They hate me," she admitted one evening as we left the shelter together. "I deserve it." "Give them time," I said. "Actions speak louder than words." She proved it the following week, staying late to counsel a teenage girl who reminded me of the old Paige, bright, ambitious, but lost. I watched through the window as Paige shared her own story, tears streaming down both their faces. The community garden proved challenging in unexpected ways. "I can't believe I used to mock this," she said, dirt streaked across her face as we planted tomatoes with local kids. "It's actually therapeutic." "Remember when you used to help me with my roses?" I asked. "Before I decided designer clothes and social status were more important?" "Yeah." She sat back on her heels. "I was so stupid." Not stupid, lost. Dwayne showed up less and less as Paige immersed herself in her new roles. Then one day, she arrived at the shelter alone, engagement ring missing. "He couldn't handle the new me," she explained simply. "Or maybe I couldn't handle the old him." The real breakthrough came during Claire's visit to the community center. Paige was teaching a cooking class to at-risk teens when Claire walked in. "I'm sorry," Paige said immediately, putting down her mixing bowl. "For the wedding. For everything." Claire hesitated, then picked up an apron. "Show me what you're making." By the end of the class, they were laughing together, flour in their hair, just like when they were kids. "You know what's weird?" Paige said to me later. "Following your conditions, doing all this community work, it was supposed to be my punishment, but it feels more like coming home." "That was the point," I admitted. "The girl in that soup kitchen photo, she didn't need revenge. She needed a way back." Paige wiped her eyes. "I have one more condition to fulfill." She pulled out a check, 15% of her savings, made out to the women's shelter. "It's not much since I'm starting over, but it's a start. Starting over is what this was always about." As we walked to our cars, Paige stopped suddenly. "Thank you," she said, "for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." I thought about the ornate box, now sitting on our desk at the shelter, filled with new photos. Paige with her cooking class, working in the garden, counseling at the shelter. "Sometimes," I said, "the best revenge is helping someone become who they were always meant to be." She smiled, a real smile, not the artificial one she'd worn for so long. "Even if that someone broke your heart?" Especially then. The autumn air was crisp as I pulled into the driveway of the lake house. Music and laughter drifted from the backyard, where Paige was hosting her first community fundraiser. "Perfect timing," Claire called from the garden. She was arranging flowers grown by the youth program. "Mom, you won't believe what Paige just did." Before she could explain, Paige emerged from the house carrying a tray of appetizers made by her cooking class. Her hair was tied back simply, and she wore a volunteer coordinator badge from the shelter. "Aunt Madeline." She set down the tray. "I need to show you something." She led me through the crowd to a newly constructed gazebo overlooking the lake. Inside, a plaque caught my eye. "The Second Chance Garden, where growth begins again." "That's not all," Claire said, joining us. "Tell her about the scholarship." Paige blushed. "I'm using my divorce settlement to create a scholarship fund for survivors at the shelter who want to pursue social work degrees." "Like you're doing?" I asked. "Actually," she pulled out an envelope. "I got my acceptance letter today. Full program, starting next semester." Before I could respond, Susan rushed over. "Paige, honey, Dwayne's here. He's demanding to speak with you." We turned to see him striding across the lawn in an expensive suit, looking out of place among the casual fundraiser crowd. "I got this," Paige said quietly. We watched as she met him halfway. Their conversation was intense but controlled. "You're throwing away everything we built," he said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "No," Paige replied calmly. "I'm building something real for the first time. Did you need something specific, or did you just come to remind me what I left behind?" "The country club board approved my membership last week," she interrupted. "Not as your wife, but as the director of community outreach. Turns out they value social contribution over social climbing." He deflated slightly. "Your mother says you're selling your designer clothes." "Consignment sale next week. Proceeds go to the shelter's legal fund." She smiled. "You should come. Might find something nice for your next wife." The crowd that had gathered tried to hide their smiles. Dwayne looked around, finally seeming to notice the meaningful work happening everywhere. Teenagers teaching gardening skills, shelter residents serving food they'd learned to cook, social workers networking with local leaders. "You really have changed," he said quietly. "Yes," Paige agreed. "I grew up. It's not too late for you either, you know." He shook his head and walked away. This time, Paige didn't watch him go. Later, as the fundraiser wound down, we sat in the gazebo watching the sunset over the lake. Claire joined us, bringing hot chocolate. "Owen's talking about volunteering at the center," she said. "The kids love him." "Everyone's welcome," Paige replied. "That's kind of the point." She pulled out the ornate box, now weathered from frequent handling. Inside, alongside the old photos, were new ones. Paige receiving her counseling certification, Claire and Paige gardening together, the three of us at shelter events. "I keep this to remind me," she said. "Not of who I was, but of who I chose to become." About that, I reached into my bag. "I brought something for you." It was a framed photo of her at 16, helping me with my roses. On the back, I'd written, "Some flowers bloom twice." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't deserve all these second chances." "That's exactly why you deserve them," I said, "because you finally understand that." Claire raised her hot chocolate. "To second chances. And third and fourth ones," Paige added, "as many as it takes." As the last guest left, carrying fresh vegetables and information packets about local services, Paige turned to me. "You know, when you gave me this house with all those conditions, I thought it was the cruelest revenge possible." She laughed softly, making me face myself, my choices, my potential. It was harder than any punishment. And now I understand that real revenge would have been letting me stay lost. She hugged me tightly. "Thank you for finding me instead." The lake reflected the last rays of sunlight as we cleaned up together. Aunt, daughter, and niece. Our shadows long, but our hearts lighter than they'd been in years. "Ready to go?" Claire asked eventually. "Actually," Paige said, "I was hoping you both might stay. I'm making grandmother's lasagna recipe for my cooking class tomorrow. Could use some expert advice." I looked at my daughter, who nodded with a smile. "We'd love to," I said, following them into the warm light of the house that had become not just Paige's home, but a home for second chances. Sometimes the best endings aren't about getting even. They're about getting better together.
A few years ago, when I was in my 20s, I was in a terrible car accident. A drunk truck driver crashed into my car, and I was hospitalized for several weeks. I broke my arm, and it took a very long time to learn how to walk again. It took even longer for all the scars to heal. It has been almost 3 years since the accident. Even though it wasn't my fault, I still drive with extreme caution. The only thing I remember from that accident is that my family refused to come to the hospital for me. The reason was that my sister went into labor. Ironically, I was on my way to surprise my sister at the hospital where she was scheduled to give birth. But I got into a car accident on the way. It was only a few weeks before the end of the year. The place I lived was only a few hours away from my hometown, so it was very convenient to travel back and forth. When I got a call from my parents saying my sister was in labor and rushing to the hospital, I decided to surprise her. I borrowed a friend's car and drove to the hospital. However, I got into an accident on the way and was rushed to the nearest hospital. My parents were too busy with my sister, so a friend stayed by my side at that time. What particularly disappointed me was that even days after my sister gave birth, my parents didn't come to check on me. I knew the situation wasn't ideal, but it still upset me. Despite being in severe pain and feeling dazed after the accident, I repeatedly called my parents. Every time a hospital staff member came to check on me, I kept asking if my parents had called or come to see me. Each time I heard their response, I felt disappointed. Finally, a week after the accident, I received a call from my parents. But it wasn't to ask if I was okay. It was to ask why I had been calling so often. They said they had been ignoring my calls because they were with my sister and her baby. I was shocked by their cold attitude, especially considering the situation. But I still asked about my sister and the baby. They told me my sister and my newborn niece were fine. I thought they must have already known I was in an accident, but they didn't ask about me. My friends told me they had sent messages to my parents through every platform. So my parents should have already known about the accident. I decided to provide the information myself. I told them about the accident and how I'd been trying to inform them for days. At that point, I at least expected some kind of reaction. But they just said they already knew from my friends and didn't say anything more. I was furious and asked if they couldn't even pretend to care about me. They told me they didn't want to talk to me because they prioritized being with my sister during her childbirth over being by my side after the accident. They deliberately ignored my calls and messages because of that. I couldn't understand what they were saying. As far as I knew, the truck driver was drunk, and the accident wasn't my fault. But they said that didn't mean I wasn't responsible. They blamed me for deciding to drive alone, calling it irresponsible. They said it was very late at night, and there was no reason for me to go driving. When I told them I was driving to the hospital to see my sister, they said I didn't need to do that. They told me the accident was entirely my fault. It was so cruel and insensitive of them to say that. I was so angry that I hung up without saying anything else. Later, I found out that when the people who discovered me at the accident site called 911, they contacted my parents first. My parents refused to come and asked not to be called about the matter again. The authorities then contacted my friends because I had their contact details with me. That's how my friends found out about the accident. Even when emergency services told my parents to rush to the hospital because their daughter had been in an accident, they didn't come. Their only response to the situation was to blame me for what happened. After that incident, I realized that while I did my best for my family, they had no interest in being there for me. Even my sister didn't try to contact me. I haven't been in touch with my family for the past 3 years since that incident. I have completely given up on them. Before this, we had a normal relationship, but I always felt like I was being sidelined as the older sister because my sister was prioritized. My family proved that to me when I had that accident. For the record, I'm not mad at my parents for not coming to see me while my sister was giving birth. However, I was angry that they didn't think it was important to come see me even after my sister had given birth. I didn't even expect my sister to visit me in the hospital. At that time, it was clearly impossible for her to do so right after giving birth. But it wasn't impossible for my parents. My sister had her husband and in-laws to take care of her. I only had my friends. Fortunately, I had friends good enough to stay by my side and help me recover. They and their parents covered all the costs of my recovery and other expenses. I am still repaying them, but I am truly grateful for everything they did for me. At the time, I couldn't afford to handle the expenses myself anyway. It's been 3 years since the incident, and they still haven't tried to contact me. Many of my relatives are wondering why I no longer keep in touch. I kept all the reasons for this to myself. There was an unspoken agreement not to talk about the incident with anyone in the family. I had adhered to that until recently, but now they've decided to discuss it. One of my aunts contacted me afterward. That's because my parents had framed the story in a way that painted me as the villain. This happened a few weeks ago when my parents hosted a dinner party at their house to celebrate my sister's promotion at work. While everyone was together, the topic of my estrangement from the family came up. After repeated questioning, my parents finally decided to explain the situation after 3 years. They must have thought there was no need to keep it a secret anymore. However, when they told the story, they conveniently altered the facts of what happened after my accident. Some parts were true, like how I planned to surprise my sister at the hospital and got into a car accident on the way. But then they claimed they hadn't heard from me. They said they found out about the accident days later. By then, so much time had passed that they were preoccupied with my sister and her baby. They also said they hadn't thought much about why I didn't reach out. When they finally got in touch with me, they claimed the first thing they did was call me. They said I was so angry with them that I refused to talk. But that was completely untrue. They further claimed they had tried to contact me several times after that, but I allegedly kept refusing their calls due to the incident, so they eventually gave up trying to reach me. They essentially portrayed the entire situation as a misunderstanding on my part. They made me out to be an utterly unforgiving villain toward them. In other words, after 3 years of silence, my parents started lying about me at a family gathering. They spread a false story that I abruptly refused contact after the accident. They claimed they had tried multiple times to reach me but couldn't. It was as if I had irrationally severed ties with my parents out of anger. One of my aunts contacted me after the family party celebrating my sister's promotion at work. Her voice was trembling on the phone, and she was clearly upset. When I told my aunt the truth, she was astonished. "I've learned that your parents have been telling such horrible lies," she said. Her words made all the emotions I'd been holding back for years come flooding to the surface. Since childhood, I was always compared to my sister. I still vividly remember the elementary school sports day. I was chosen as a relay runner and practiced hard. My team finished in second place. But my parents' attention was only on my sister, who was the cheerleading captain. "I wish you could stand out like your sister," my mother said. Her words still linger in my ears. The day I brought home my report card was always nerve-wracking. Even if I got an A grade, they would ask, "Why isn't it a perfect score?" Meanwhile, my sister, who got a B grade, would be praised with, "You did so well." On the day of my junior high school closing ceremony, I wasn't feeling well from the stress of test week. But my parents went to my sister's extracurricular performance instead. They left with the words, "You're the stronger one." In high school, I was desperate to balance academics and club activities. I also served as the student council president and secured a university recommendation. But my parents' attention was focused on my sister, who landed the lead role in the drama club. Looking back, the difference in how my sister and I were treated was most apparent during family trips. In the summer of my second year in junior high, we went to Napa Valley. It was a luxurious trip where we stayed at a high-end hotel, but it was to celebrate my sister's victory in a choir competition. When I had won an award in the state science competition the previous year, all I got was a congratulations. At the hotel, my sister got the bed with the best view. I got a cramped spot near the door. "You're the stronger one." That phrase was always used to justify my patience. At dinner, the menu was centered around my sister's favorite dishes, with no consideration for the foods I disliked. The disparity was clear even in club activities. I participated in the state swimming competition, but my parents didn't come, saying they were too busy. On the other hand, they often went to cheer at my sister's volleyball practice games. "Your sister is emotionally delicate." That was another excuse I frequently heard. Even my university acceptance was overshadowed by news of my sister participating in a drama competition. The pattern didn't change after I became an adult. After graduating from university, I joined an IT company and steadily built my career as a systems engineer. I worked overtime willingly and actively learned new skills. At 25, I became an assistant manager, and at 28, I was promoted to project manager. My father said, "You're too serious." Meanwhile, my sister, who had dropped out of university and started working as a temp, was praised as finding her own path. At my first promotion celebration, my father changed the topic by saying, "I hope your sister finds a job soon." My mother indirectly asked for help by saying, "You're stable, so please support your sister too." I started sending money to my parents when my father fell ill and retired early. Initially, it was $500 a month. But my mother said, "Your sister will need money for her wedding too," and the amount gradually increased. Before I knew it, $1,000 a month became the norm. I gave up on buying my own apartment and lived a modest life in a small unit. Even so, I endured it because I thought I was helping my family. As my salary increased and bonuses grew, my parents' demands also escalated. "We need to save for your sister's wedding fund. We should start thinking about renovating the house. Before I knew it, more than a third of my income was disappearing from my parents and sister. Just as I was trying to save for a down payment on my own apartment, news of my sister's wedding came up. "You have savings, so it'll be fine, right?" my sister said, leaving no room for me to argue. I was asked not only to cover the $20,000 wedding costs, but also to help with the down payment for her new home, which completely drained my savings. On the wedding day, I managed everything from decorating the venue to handling the reception and arranging photography. Even so, my parents' speech was filled with blessings for my sister and her husband, with not a single word of gratitude for me. Watching my sister in her wedding dress posing for photos with our parents, I quietly left the venue. My life took a drastic turn on the day of the accident. While I was stopped at a traffic light, a drunk truck driver crashed into my car at full speed. As the violent impact blurred my consciousness, my thoughts were on my parents. In the ambulance, barely conscious, I kept repeating, "Please contact my parents." However, my parents refused to take the emergency responders' calls. Their reason was that they were busy attending my sister's childbirth. Lying alone on the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, I kept pondering the meaning of family. The pain in my broken arm seemed smaller compared to the pain in my heart. Rehabilitation was grueling. Walking exercises, arm therapy, none of it progressed as I hoped, and I often felt like giving up. At those times, it was my friends who supported me. They took turns visiting my hospital room, constantly offering words of encouragement. Their parents even covered my medical expenses, making it possible for me to continue treatment. Yet, my parents never visited me, not even once. The hardest moment came in the second week of rehab. I had just started walking exercises, gripping the parallel bars, and taking one determined step at a time. A nurse encouraged me, saying, "Take it slow, you're doing great." Sweating, I pushed through the training. My friend Mary visited me almost daily. She would stop by after work, always bringing my favorite books or magazines. "If your parents won't come, I'll be your family instead," she said. How many times did her words bring me to tears? Even my boss was understanding, telling me, "Take your time and focus on healing." My colleagues took turns visiting me, sharing updates about the office. Their presence made me feel connected to society. By the third month of rehab, I was finally able to walk on my own. My doctor told me, "Your strong will is the reason you've recovered so quickly." But I knew the truth. It was because of the unwavering support of my friends. Meanwhile, my parents still hadn't visited. After my sister gave birth, my mother sent me an email once, but all it contained was a photo of the baby. Not a single word about my condition or well-being. Even so, strangely enough, I didn't immediately stop sending money. The habit of transferring $1,000 every month continued even after the accident. Perhaps, deep down, I hoped it was my last chance, that my parents would realize their mistakes and we could mend our relationship. But that hope was utterly betrayed. My parents began distorting the truth about the accident in front of our relatives, as if I had rejected them out of unreasonable anger and severed the family ties. When I heard the truth from my aunt, something inside me broke irreparably. On the day I made arrangements to stop the transfers, the bank clerk looked puzzled. "Are you sure you want to suddenly stop a transfer you've maintained for years?" they asked. I calmly replied, "Yes, it's no longer necessary." At that moment, my heart felt inexplicably lighter. It was as if I had finally been freed from the burden I had carried for so many years. After that, my parents' lifestyle changed drastically. The overseas trips they took every year became impossible. Dining out at high-end restaurants was no longer feasible. Even my sister had to start a weekend part-time job to cover her living expenses after my parents' financial support ceased. My parents' responses shifted gradually. At first, I was bombarded with angry messages. "I can't believe you could do this to us. How could you abandon your family?" These accusations came almost daily. However, as financial reality set in, Their tone began to soften. "We were truly sorry for what happened back then. We should have been more considerate. We should have thought about your feelings." But those words of apology were always followed by, "Our life is really hard now. Could you please help us somehow?" It wasn't genuine regret, but calculated apologies driven by economic necessity. My sister's reactions were even more intense. "You know our parents are living on their pension, right? My child's education costs are tough too. How can you be so heartless to your family?" Ironically, that word, family, was what I had needed most during the accident. The reactions from relatives varied. My uncle said, "A spoiled younger sister and an older sister who has been taken advantage of. This is the natural outcome," supporting my decision. When I showed hospital records and transfer histories, many relatives came to understand my decision. In particular, my aunt became a significant source of support. "You've done more than enough for your family. It's time for you to live your own life." Those words gave me confidence that my decision was the right one. 6 months have passed since I cut off financial support, and my life has changed significantly. I started attending a photography class, a long-held dream of mine. The instructor, Mr. Smith, praised the unique perspective in my work. "Your photographs capture the subtleties of life," he said, bringing tears to my eyes. I began going on photography trips with classmates from the course during weekends. Even when they learned about my past, they never judged me negatively. In fact, they supported my decision. I've become particularly close friends with Carla, who also attends the class. We've developed a relationship where we can share our struggles with one another. At work, I was chosen as the leader for a new project. Previously, I used to take on overtime to support my family financially. Now, I use my time for personal fulfillment. I've started going out for meals with my team members after work, and with one of them, I felt a special bond beginning to form. As my savings grew, I was finally able to purchase the condominium I had always dreamed of. A bright living room filled with sunlight, walls where I can display my favorite photographs, and a peaceful space all to myself. I feel this is the beginning of my new life. On weekends, I host home parties and invite the friends who supported me during my rehab days. They genuinely celebrated my new life and said, "You're finally living as your true self." Above all, I feel happiness in being surrounded by people who understand and value me. Even without the ties of blood, I have found a bond that is genuine, based on mutual understanding and support. I heard that my parents were forced to give up the house they had lived in for many years. They had fallen behind on mortgage payments. Their new residence is an old apartment building, a 20-minute walk from the nearest station. There's no elevator, and they struggle with climbing the stairs every day. They had to sell most of their furniture and appliances. I heard my mother tearfully sold her expensive dishes and sentimental belongings. During the move, they were subjected to the curious eyes of their neighbors and couldn't even lift their heads. My sister's finances also became increasingly strained. Her relationship with her husband deteriorated, and even his parents accused her, saying, "Why should we be dragged into your family's problems?" At a family meeting that I attended, my uncle directed harsh words at my parents. "After exploiting your eldest daughter for so many years, how can you say anything now?" Another aunt added, "This is the result of favoring your younger daughter and treating her this way." My parents kept their heads down the entire time, unable to find words to defend themselves. Once the center of family gatherings, my parents are now no longer even invited. The same is true for my sister. I heard that during the Christmas family gathering, no seats were prepared for my parents or my sister's family. It seems my mother, in particular, is struggling mentally. To avoid running into acquaintances at the supermarket, she now shops at stores far from home. My father has stopped going golfing on weekends, his favorite hobby, and tends to stay home. I also heard that no one attended my niece's birthday party. Although invitations were sent, everyone declined, citing other commitments. While I feel sorry for the child, who bears no fault, I also understand this is the result of my parents' and sisters' actions. Recently, my parents' health has also been declining. Living in a low-cost apartment for pensioners has likely been more difficult than they anticipated. I've heard their air conditioning broke, and they couldn't afford to repair it, leaving it as is. Sometimes I feel a pang of pain in my chest, but this change was necessary. For the first time, I feel like I'm truly living my own life. It's a life not spent meeting someone else's expectations or enduring for someone else's sake, but a life for myself. If not for the accident, I might never have come to this realization. Perhaps people only recognize the weight of their past mistakes when they face hardship. But how much value is there in repentance driven by financial necessity? It may seem cold, but this is the path I've chosen. And for the first time, I feel true freedom. What is unconditional love? Have you ever thought about that question? It is the experience of being loved simply for existing, without having to do anything. Today, I would like to share with you my story: dramatic changes in my life abandoned by my birth parents and raised as an adopted child. My name is Carol, and I am 32 years old. I was born with a weak body and developed epilepsy at a young age. Because of this, I was a child who required a lot of attention. My sister Joyce, who is 2 years older than me, has a beautiful face with fair skin, big eyes, and a prominent nose. Our parents had hoped that if they had daughters, one would become a TV announcer for a major TV network, and Joyce was the daughter who fulfilled those expectations. On the other hand, ordinary-faced me was a disappointment to them. Even as a child, I noticed the difference in how my parents treated us sisters. Due to my epileptic seizures, I only attended kindergarten during my final year. During that time, I watched enviously as my mother tied Joyce's hair and dressed her in cute clothes. While Joyce attended kindergarten, I spent my days alone at home, playing with dolls or drawing. Even though my mother was a stay-at-home mom and was always home, I have no memory of her playing with me. Perhaps feeling sorry for me, Joyce said, "Carol, this is a lucky leaf. It will stop your seizures and make you feel better." "Look, Carol, see? It's like a princess," she said, giving me a 4-leaf clover and a crown made of white clover flowers. Believing in her words, I sometimes secretly searched the nearby vacant lot for 4-leaf clovers. One day, a large truck arrived, delivering a piano to Joyce's room. Fascinated by the sight of a piano for the first time, I watched Joyce play it with great interest. "Carol, do you want to try playing it?" she asked. But as I reached out to touch the keys, my mother scolded me, "Stop bothering your sister." That piano was hers. Her face was scarier than any demon. When I started elementary school, Joyce was busy with piano, French lessons, ballet, and swimming. Preoccupied with her activities, my mother assigned me household chores. "Since you're always home, you should help out a little," she said. I began doing cleaning, laundry, and dishwashing, and by 3rd grade, I was preparing meals for the family. On cold winter days, I was told, "Hot water costs money, so use cold water," and I vividly remember blowing warm breaths onto my chilblained hands. Joyce, who was beautiful and excelled academically, always scored perfect marks on tests. "Joyce, you did great." "Your sister is amazing," my parents would say as they patted her head. Hoping to be praised myself, I said, "Mom, I scored 102. Smiling, I showed her my test paper. But she replied, "Carol, stop that smug grin. I told you, copying your sister is pointless." Huh. I was shocked as I didn't expect to be criticized for my smile or to be compared to Joyce even after scoring 100 points. After that, I stopped showing my test papers or forcing myself to smile. There is one unforgettable moment. As the elementary school graduation ceremony approached, Joyce was away at a skating lesson organized by her school. "Carol, we're going to a restaurant today," my father suddenly announced, surprising me. This was unexpected since they had never taken me out to eat before. Feeling more puzzled than happy, I followed them to the restaurant, where my aunt and uncle were waiting. I thought to myself, what is going on? Carol, you can eat whatever you like today, they told me. Still confused, I said, well, then, I'd like the kids' meal, please. My parents looked at me in slight surprise. Are you sure a kid's meal is fine, they asked. For me, the kids' meal was something I had longed for, tasted delicious, and felt comforting at that moment. Then, my father spoke to me with a serious expression. Carol, actually, Joyce will be attending a school in the city starting next month. Your mother and I will be going with her. Ha! I couldn't hide my shock at the sudden announcement. When I fell silent, my mother continued. Carol, we truly wish we could take you with us, but because of your epilepsy, your aunt is a nurse and has agreed to take care of you. Since your aunt and uncle don't have children, they've decided to adopt you and raise you as their own. Your uncle owns several companies, so you'll be able to live without any worries. This is what's best for you, Carol. It felt as though my heart was shattered in an instant. Afterward, my aunt spoke to me gently. Carol, would you mind living with us? I couldn't find the words to respond. It wasn't that I disliked my aunt and uncle. They were always worried about me because of my illness. Unlike my parents or Joyce, they genuinely cared for me. They looked after me whenever my family wasn't around and made me feel cherished. As I hesitated, my mother added what sounded like advice. Carol, I know you love the piano. Even though you tried to keep it a secret, I know your aunt has been teaching you to play. So why don't you become a part of your aunt's family and continue playing the piano? With those words, refusing was not an option. I wasn't being abandoned. Starting a new life at my aunt's house was meant to be a happy beginning for me. I nodded quietly. Raised by my aunt and uncle, I truly experienced the comfortable life my mother had described. Why don't you take formal piano lessons, my aunt suggested, and soon I started regular piano training. They carefully managed my diet and exercise to improve my health, and by the time I graduated middle school, my epileptic seizures had subsided. I was finally able to live a normal life. When I was accepted into the state's top high school, my aunt and uncle shed tears of joy. Not a day goes by that I don't think about my family, but I remind myself that seeing my aunt and uncle happy is my happiness too. After graduating high school, I was considering finding a job, but my aunt said, "You've been such a good girl all your life. Do something for yourself this time," and supported my decision to attend a music university. When university life began, she kept in touch, calling me every day and occasionally visiting me to make sure I was doing well living on my own. One day in my 4th year at university, something unexpected happened. Carol, how have you been? The voice on the other end of the phone was my sister's. It was the first time I had heard her voice in 10 years. Although I should have felt happy, I replied with a plain, "Oh, hi. How have you been, Joyce?" The 10-year gap had created an emotional distance that I couldn't immediately bridge. Joyce had asked my aunt for my phone number and decided to call me. "I heard you won a piano competition." Aunt told me about it. "Congratulations." She was referring to a piano competition held in the state. "Yeah, thanks. But it wasn't a very big competition," I said modestly. While the competition didn't make national headlines, it had been featured prominently in the local newspaper. Even so, that's amazing. Being first place in any competition is something to be proud of, Joyce said encouragingly. Her words reminded me of the time when she was the only one in the family who praised me for scoring 100 on a test. As I reflected on that memory, Joyce's voice suddenly softened, and she asked me an unexpected question. "Hey Carol, do you hate me?" "What?" I was stunned and unable to immediately respond. "What? No, of course not. I admit, it was lonely not hearing from you for 10 years, but our aunt helped me recover from my illness. I don't resent you at all." "What?" This time, it was Joyce who sounded shocked. She confessed that she hadn't known I had been adopted by our aunt and uncle. The revelation left her deeply shaken. Then, she shared with me a truth she had just uncovered. I always believed that I wasn't abandoned, but rather that my parents entrusted me to my aunt and uncle to heal my illness and lead a happy life. The 10 years I spent convincing myself of this were now unraveling before my eyes. Hearing my sister's story, I was at a loss for words. Carol, I'm so sorry. I truly thought you knew everything. Dad and Mom told me they had shared the whole truth with you, Joyce said apologetically. It's fine. This isn't your fault, Joyce. The real problem is those two. At that moment, my ambiguous feelings toward my parents transformed into outright resentment. They're struggling financially now, so they'll probably try to reach out to you. Be careful, Joyce warned. Thank you. A month later, I returned to my aunt and uncle's home. The doorbell rang. Carol, you have visitors, my aunt called out. Entering the living room together, I saw them, my parents standing there. It had been 10 years since I last saw them. They stared at me, astonished by how much I had changed. Is this really Carol? The one who had such a plain face, they muttered in disbelief. It's not uncommon for people to undergo remarkable transformations from their awkward teenage years to adulthood, becoming more polished and refined. I guess I was one of those cases. Though not a stunning beauty, I had reached my utmost potential. Have you been well, my mother asked? Internally, I felt anything but cordial, thinking, just leave already, but outwardly, I smiled and replied, yes, I have. How about Joyce? Well, Joyce, despite all the investment we made in her education, she couldn't keep up at her urban school. She ended up graduating from a mediocre university and now works at some no-name company. She lives alone now, but she's managing somehow, my mother said with a bitter tone. Her words dripped with sarcasm. So, what about you two? How are you doing? What's your work and living situation, I asked, steering the conversation. Oh, well, we've grown tired of city life. We're planning to start a new business here, and we'll be staying in a nearby apartment for the time being, my father said vaguely. The story felt suspiciously incomplete. From what Joyce told me, my father had left his job a decade ago, joined a company through a connection, and was forced to return to his hometown after the company went under just a month ago. Anyway, why don't we have a family meal together? It's on me, so order whatever you like, my father suggested. A family meal? After all this time? I thought incredulously. That sounds wonderful. You three should enjoy yourselves, my aunt said, diffusing the tension. In that case, how about an oyster bar, I suggested with a smile. We went to the specified oyster bar for dinner. Order anything you'd like, my father repeated. I remembered hearing similar words 10 years ago. Then, I'd like one of the deluxe oyster sets. Please, I said. Of course, the waiter responded. Oh, and could I get 2 grilled lobsters to go, I added. Certainly. At that moment, my father, squinting at the menu through his reading glasses, let out a startled, "What?" The oysters I ordered were the priciest item on the menu, at $120, as were the lobsters. Was that too bold of me, I asked lightly. My father quickly responded, no, not at all. But who are the 2 extra lobsters for? They're for Aunt and Uncle. It wouldn't feel right to indulge by myself, and since you said I could order anything, I thought I'd take you up on your offer, I replied. Ah, yes, of course, that's fine. Haha, my father laughed nervously, glancing into his wallet and whispering something to my mother. I'm not that hungry, my mother finally said. I'll just have a salad and soup. That should be enough, right? She proposed, turning to my father. Yes, that'll do, he agreed, clearly trying to keep costs down. My parents chose the most affordable option on the menu, soup and salad. By the way, we have something important to discuss, my mother began. With your first place win at the competition and your looks, I'm sure you're getting attention from many places. Have you already found a sponsor? As expected, the conversation turned in this direction. Well, actually. Yes, I replied, feigning hesitation. If you need a manager, I can do it. It was so hard being apart for the last 10 years, but we can be together again. Just like before, my mother said with an air of confidence. I couldn't believe she had the audacity to say that. To steer the conversation away, I said lightly, "Thank you for the meal today. By the way, are you free next Tuesday evening? I'd like you to come hear my piano performance." "I wouldn't miss it," my mother exclaimed. "Then let's meet here at this restaurant at 5 p.m., I said, handing them the restaurant's business card. The day of the performance came. "Oh, so you're here too?" My parents, upon arriving at the restaurant, were visibly surprised to see my aunt and uncle there as well. "Today, I wanted to celebrate a special anniversary, so I reserved this place and invited aunt and uncle too," I explained. It was the same date as 10 years ago, when my parents brought me to a restaurant for a meal before leaving me in my aunt and uncle's care. The original restaurant no longer existed. In its place stood an elegant French restaurant owned by a friend of my uncle. An anniversary? "But it's not anyone's birthday, is it?" my mother asked, puzzled. "Exactly," I replied, noticing they had completely forgotten the significance of the day. "Don't you remember? 10 years ago we had a meal together, and you told me to be happy as part of aunt and uncle's family." "Oh, right. My memory's not what it used to be." "I completely forgot," my mother said dismissively. Forgot? To them, it was a trivial moment, easily dismissed. "Since there's some time before the meal, why don't I play a few pieces on the piano for you?" I suggested while walking toward the piano. "Dad, Mom, I'll play with all my heart, so please listen closely," I said before performing a selection of famous classical pieces. My parents listened, dramatically shedding tears as they pretended to be moved. "Carol, thank you so much." "That was beautiful," my mother said. "Yes, truly moving," my father added, maintaining the act. Shortly after, I addressed the staff. "It's about time. Could you begin preparing the meal?" "What kind of dishes will we have?" my mother asked, her tone filled with anticipation. "This place looks fancy." "I'm excited to see what's on the menu," my father added, quickly wiping away his tears. At that moment, the doors opened and a couple entered the restaurant. "Over here, Joyce," I called out, waving toward the entrance. My parents turned, shocked. "Why is Joyce here? And who's that man with her?" they asked, their confusion evident. "Today, we're here to celebrate Joyce's marriage and the start of a new chapter in our family," I announced boldly. "What? Joyce got married?" they asked, their faces frozen in disbelief. It was clear they had no idea. In fact, Joyce had reached out to me after 10 years precisely to share this important news. Seeing their bewildered faces, I smiled warmly and said, "Well, I think it's time for you two to leave." What they exclaimed, stunned. They stared at me in utter disbelief. "Do you understand the meaning of the pieces I played earlier?" They represented a decision to say goodbye. "What? It seems you still don't understand. What I'm saying is that, as of today, our relationship is over." I explained to them politely but with a hint of sarcasm. "What's this? How dare you speak to your parents like that? Stop joking around for once." My parents, trembling with anger, raised their voices in protest. "You're the ones who are joking," Joyce countered firmly. She pressed even harder with conviction. "Do you really not remember what you did in the past? 10 years ago, when Carol was still sick, who decided her medical expenses were too much and pushed her care onto Aunt, and who forced Aunt to pay $10,000 for a second-hand piano worth only $2,000. Now, just because Carol won a competition, you think you can be her manager? Parents like that are what people call toxic parents. If you understand, I suggest you leave this place immediately." Joyce stood her ground like a passionate detective confronting a criminal in a TV drama. After this heated exchange, my usually calm and kind aunt finally spoke up. "Everyone, listen carefully. Now is the time to make things clear. Your selfish and insensitive behavior, treating your daughters as if they were your possessions, disgusts me to my core. From now on, stay out of our lives, including Joyce's," she declared, her voice filled with an anger I had never seen before. It was the first time I had witnessed my gentle aunt express such fury. Then, my uncle stepped in, speaking even more firmly. "You two have no qualifications to call yourselves parents, so leave this place now." In that moment, I felt the depth of the bond between my aunt, uncle, and us, recognizing us as their children. Cornered, my parents had no escape. What would they do now? The first to raise his hand was my father. "I'm sorry, I was wrong. Please forgive me," he said, breaking into tears. I expected my mother to follow with an apology, but her response was entirely unexpected. Pathetic. A grown man crying and apologizing? "That's why you'll always be a failure." "You idiot husband," she snapped, sharply criticizing him. "What? A failure? That's because you're a woman who brings nothing but trouble." "It's your fault I'm in this situation," my father shouted back. "What are you saying?" "Trouble. How dare you," my mother gasped, throwing the words back at him. This exchange ignited an explosive argument between them, one so heated it looked like they might never reconcile. The rest of us could only watch in bewilderment. "Excuse me," a staff member from the restaurant interrupted politely. "Shall we proceed with serving the meal, or would you prefer we call the police given the circumstances?" At once, my parents united in their response. "There's absolutely no need to call the police," they said resolutely, before quickly leaving without a word. "Phew, what an impromptu performance we just witnessed," someone joked, prompting a mix of laughter and relief among us. "Let's make sure we never end up like that," Joyce and her husband said with a smile, sealing their promise to each other. "Now, shall we toast to a new chapter in our lives?" someone suggested. With a unanimous cheer, we raised our glasses, celebrating as though we had won a great victory. Later, my parents' lives unfolded differently. Despite often blaming their misfortunes on their daughter's immaturity, it became clear that their own actions were the root cause of many issues. Eventually, they got divorced. My father now struggles alone, working tirelessly to make ends meet, while my mother moves from one part-time job to another at tourist spots, unable to secure stable housing. As for us, our story of celebrating a new chapter continues. Joyce, thank you for watching over me and supporting me from afar all these years. "And congratulations on your marriage," I said, dedicating a special wedding song to her. Then I turned to my aunt and uncle. "To my true dad and mom, thank you for raising me with unwavering love and care. I hope we can continue to walk together through life," I said as I played a melody full of gratitude on the piano. It was the first time I expressed these long-held feelings aloud. "Carol, we're the ones who are grateful," my uncle said warmly. "Thank you for being our daughter," my aunt added, tears in her eyes. What was once a painful memory had transformed into a day of joy and celebration for our new family. 6 years after that day, I married Cliff, my high school sweetheart. We've been blessed with 2 lovely daughters and now live together in a duplex, supporting each other as a family. Though I could have pursued bigger dreams after graduating from music university, for me, being with my family and filling our home with smiles has always been my greatest dream. My father asked me to take on the responsibility of my stepsister's college expenses, promising to pay me back later. However, years passed, and when I needed the funds for my wedding, he refused on the grounds that he could not accept my fiancé. I am 33 years old, but my relationship with my family has always been unstable. I tried to understand my family, and I believe my parents did the same. But we could not create a comfortable home environment. My parents divorced when I was 10 years old. At that time, I felt relief rather than sadness, as living together was never peaceful, especially for a sensitive child. The constant arguments and shouting in a problematic household are still stuck in my memory. From my childhood, I was often forced to mediate and resolve conflicts between my parents, reluctantly leading them to discussions or attempting to solve problems. On overwhelming days, I would not go straight home from school but seek refuge at my nearby paternal grandparents' house. The time spent with my grandparents was my only solace, as they cared for me deeply, making their home a sanctuary for me. My grandparents did interfere with my parents' issues, but after realizing it was futile, they told my parents not to burden me with adult problems. However, their advice was not heeded. Still, at that time, I did not realize that the role I was bearing was different from other children's roles. It felt like an unavoidable responsibility, and I did not see it as something special. The thought that other children were not performing such roles never occurred to me. When my parents divorced, I felt a sense of relief and stability. I moved between my parents' homes every few weeks, experiencing personal growth for the first time. The absence of shouting and conflicts allowed me to spend calm time with one parent at a time. These peaceful moments were precious and comfortable for me. I could feel my parents' love, spend my time freely, and engage in activities I enjoyed. I was particularly grateful that after the divorce, my parents never spoke ill of each other in front of me. Despite their complex emotions, they did not impose them on me. They might have vented their feelings elsewhere, but they were considerate in their interactions with me. I remember the constant hostility and conflicts in the house ceasing the moment my mother left. When I was 15, my father remarried a woman named Susan. I have built a very good relationship with my stepmother, Susan, which I cherish deeply. She is a wonderful person, and I have never harbored any negative feelings towards her. Although it was challenging to build a relationship initially, I believe we adapted well overall. However, the challenge arose when Susan married my father, as her daughter, Julia, was only 7 years old at the time. To be honest, Julia was somewhat self-centered. My father tried to maintain peace in the house by fulfilling Julia's desires. Even when Julia irritated or provoked me, my father always defended her, saying, "She is just a small child trying to adapt to a new environment, and you should respond calmly as an adult." For example, when Julia moved in, she treated my entire room as her own and took it over. While Julia was expected to live in that house for a long time, I was only there half of the month and planned to leave for college in a few years. Consequently, I was asked to give up my room, but I was not easily convinced. I did not want to relinquish my space or share a room with a much younger child. Eventually, my father proposed that Julia and I share the same room as the best solution. Susan then intervened in the situation. Whether she wanted to protect her daughter from her much older stepsister, me, or avoid worsening our relationship, I was unsure. However, she stated that it was unreasonable to take my room away and suggested that Julia should get another room. Ultimately, my father's decision not to rearrange the rooms was not due to my wishes but was influenced by Susan's strong suggestion. Witnessing my father disregard my opinion and follow his new wife's made me feel a strange sense of change in our relationship. Staying at my father's house was painful, not because of his new wife or her daughter, but because of my father's attitude, which made me feel alienated. However, I continued to visit because Susan treated me with genuine care. She took a real interest in my life, made an effort to spend time with me, and cooked my favorite meals during my stay. While my father seemed indifferent, Susan appeared to be my support. I kept my distance from Julia as much as possible since she was often complainant, and Susan never forced me to get along with her daughter. 3 years later, when I went to college, my father and Susan had another child named Emma, who is now 15 years old. Due to our age difference, Emma and I have not developed a close relationship. Strictly speaking, we are a family, but I do not feel we are connected by heart. When Emma was born, my father called me to say, "We can't afford it, so you'll have to manage the college expenses on your own." This was a shocking event for me. My father had been saving for my college education, enough to cover it without loans. However, when he reneged on his promise, my mother increased her support to minimize the loans I needed to take. Nonetheless, I ended up with some debt but managed to secure a job after graduation that paid enough to cover the repayments. This incident created an irreparable rift between my father and me. The money that was supposed to be used for me was diverted for his new family. Afterward, I rarely visited my father's house and almost lost contact with him. Surprisingly, I still maintain a connection with Susan and Julia. To my father, it seems he hardly noticed my absence, probably because he had new children to care for. For about 7 years, I almost had no contact with my father. During that time, I graduated from college, moved cities, and even lived abroad for a year. Around the age of 25, my father suddenly contacted me, initiating a light conversation. I sensed he had an ulterior motive, not just small talk. Then he revealed that Emma had faced a medical emergency a few months ago. I was already aware of the situation through Susan and had been inquiring about it occasionally. I knew it had caused them a significant financial strain. Susan had savings set aside for Julia's college expenses, but my father used all of it for Emma's medical costs without telling her. He asked me to help with Julia's tuition and promised to repay me once things settled. I did not want to help my father. I wanted him to fully face the consequences of his actions. So I told him, "You have disappointed me." I had hoped he would make better choices for Julia, but he did not. "You told me to manage my own college expenses, and now you're doing the same to Julia. Moreover, you used the money saved for her without permission," I told my father. I added, "I managed with loans, so Julia can do the same," but he denied that, saying she could not get loans. Her biological father's support could not be expected to match what my mother had done for me, complicating the situation. I was prepared to help Julia. She had grown into a kind-hearted young woman, and I was glad to maintain a relationship with her. I called my father again, stating my conditions for helping. He must be honest with Susan and promise repayment. He did not want to involve Susan, but I told him I would not support him unless he was honest with her. After our call ended, I thought that was the end of the conversation. However, 3 days later, Susan called me, tearfully expressing her deep gratitude for what I had done. I had offered my support. My father had asked me to pass the tuition money to him, but since I did not trust him, I said I would give it directly to Julia instead. Julia agreed with this arrangement and later expressed her gratitude over the phone. Our relationship improved after that. But then the real problem began. I was engaged to Omar, who was originally from Afghanistan but grew up in the States, just like me. This displeased my father, who openly opposed it. I did not care about his background. I have not had a functional relationship with my father anyways. My mother and Susan liked Omar, and because Julia was close to me, the important people in my life all had a good impression of him. That was what mattered to me. We were preparing for our wedding, and I went to my father to ask for the tuition money I lent Julia. I told him that I needed the payment immediately because I planned to use the money for the wedding. My father argued that if Julia did not pay him, he would not give me a cent. Despite his opposition, I told him I was going to marry him. I informed my father that how I used the money was none of his business, and he had no right to threaten me. The repayment was rightfully mine, and even if it was used for my wedding, it had nothing to do with him. He had no right to interfere with my decisions. I might have not been able to fully convey how angry I was. There were heated exchanges, and I eventually decided not to invite him to the wedding. I also hinted at revealing his betrayal to his family and acquaintances, though he probably did not take me seriously at the time. Instead of exploding in anger, I decided to tell my close ones about his betrayal. I decided to send a detailed explanation of how he stole from Julia. I had prepared the funds necessary for Emma's upbringing, after which he came to me for help, promising to repay me. However, he quickly retracted that promise when it became convenient for him not to repay. The content was too lengthy to detail here, but that was the main event. I sent this message to my mother, Susan, Julia, my paternal grandparents, and my father's sister and her family. I did not send it to Emma. She was still a child, and I felt she should not be involved in this matter. I was not looking for a major reaction to my message. Honestly, I did this to vent my frustration and anger. and since I was able to cover the wedding expenses myself, I felt I might have gone a bit too far. Nevertheless, it was a significant decision, and now I am truly glad I did it because now everyone knows how terrible a person my father is. The day after I sent the message, I received a call from my paternal grandfather. We exchanged usual greetings at first, but he quickly got to the point, asking if what I had sent was true and if I had actually helped my father with Julia's tuition. I confirmed that it was true and that I had lent a considerable amount to my father. Then he asked if all the money was used for Emma, and I answered that it was. My grandfather began to express his opinion. When Emma became ill, my father had hastily called him, explaining that he was facing financial difficulties and did not know how to handle Emma's medical expenses. He said he had Julia's college funds available but could not access them, so he could not use them for Emma. I interrupted him, informing my grandfather that, in fact, my father had full control over those funds and had used the money without consulting Susan. I also mentioned that Susan needed to be informed about the fact that my father had depleted Julia's money. From this conversation, I understood that Julia's money had not been used for Emma's medical expenses. This was because my grandfather had paid all of Emma's medical bills, and he was assured that the money would be returned. Julia's college funds had been taken care of by my father for another undisclosed reason, and Susan had known about my father's actions and contacted me. After hanging up the phone, I felt sick, as if surrounded by fraudsters and traitors, unable to trust anyone. I felt as if my wedding had been ruined because all these problems were too overwhelming, especially just before starting a new chapter of my life. I called my mother and confided everything to her. She encouraged me, saying that I should no longer involve myself in this futile matter and that we could resolve these disputes later. I said that since I am marrying a wonderful man, ensuring that no one ruins this important moment is what he and I can do now. My mother said there would be plenty of time later to blame my father and Susan. Indeed, there were more important things I should be doing now. I didn't need to do anything but wait. This was because my grandfather was very angry and was planning a small revenge against my father, intending to trick him. The house where my father and Susan live actually belongs to my grandfather. When my father married my mother, my grandfather provided the house to him but never asked for it back. Ultimately, the house would have become my father's upon my grandfather's death. My grandfather had never charged my father rent, but my father was supposed to cover the costs of any renovations to the house. The changes my grandfather made to the house were indeed dramatic and garnered enough attention. Then, my grandfather sent a message to the family group, telling me he was giving me the house as a wedding gift to support my new life. He had done the same for my father and said that considering I hadn't received enough support from my father, he would help me this time. I knew about my grandfather's scheme. However, what he continued to write was completely unexpected. The house that was supposed to be passed to my father, where he had been living but was legally still my grandfather's, was actually a gift for me. It was clear that my grandfather had been spiteful in doing this, and my father must understand that well. The problem is, I don't live in the same area as my father and have no plans to return. This is known among the family. While owning the house holds significant value for me, I have no plans to live there until at least retirement. For my father, who has lived in that house for many years, having it taken away would cause him significant damage and tarnish his reputation. While I had no sympathy for my father now that I actually hold the ownership, I understand how deeply hurt I would be if I were in his position. My father knew I had the power to take the house, evict him, demand rent, or do as I please. Of course, one cannot ignore the law, but realistically, it is well known how much authority the owner of a house has over a tenant. I can't predict how much of a reaction this will cause, but there is no doubt my father will be furious. While that is certain, I don't want to deal with unnecessary problems before my wedding. Whatever the reason my grandfather gave me the house, I had a heartfelt appreciation for his gift. I haven't decided exactly what to do about it yet, but I don't want to spend time on it now. With just a week left until the wedding, the family relations had completely fallen apart. I tried to distance myself from the trouble as much as possible, but it was unavoidable after my grandfather said he would give me the house. Despite trying to stay calm, I couldn't avoid getting involved. It turned into a big deal because my father likely didn't anticipate such a scenario. He called me several times, but I didn't answer because I could guess the content of the calls. Subsequently, he sent me messages trying to convince me to bring my grandfather to his senses, and even wrote that his way of raising me led to him becoming such a person who would betray his own family. I didn't respond to those messages and eventually blocked my father. Despite that, he tried to contact me through various means, even asking Susan to call me. She called once, but since I didn't respond, she didn't call again. Realizing other methods weren't working, he started sending me emails, which clearly conveyed his desperation. Ignoring his words continued, but seeing 5 emails every morning was mentally exhausting. It made me dread waking up, fearing what would await me. He was not invited to the wedding, but the thought of him showing up uninvited was increasingly worrying. I didn't want to see him at all. Honestly, I believe it would be best to keep a distance from Susan as well, as I was anxious she might cause some issues during the wedding. After the wedding, I called my grandfather and asked him to ensure this issue didn't affect me until I returned from my honeymoon. I didn't care what he did with the situation, but I wanted my honeymoon to remain undisturbed. I didn't want my most important day ruined by family problems anymore. My grandfather promised to ensure my father wouldn't do anything, and that I wouldn't receive any contact from them until after my honeymoon. I hoped nothing would happen, but I prepared to deal with it myself after I returned. There was a lot to be done, and I didn't have time to spend it on a father who had only used me for money. I had a happy marriage. Just a few days ago, Omar and I returned from a wonderful honeymoon. We had a great time alone, undisturbed by family. I believed no more troubles would arise, however I was painfully reminded that wasn't the case. When I returned, I didn't expect to face such a complicated situation. Yesterday, Julia called me, asking me to meet Susan. I honestly told her I didn't want to see Susan. The stress had been too much, and I had no choice but to uninvite Susan from the wedding. Julia said she understood my feelings. She mentioned that Susan felt the same but still wanted to meet once to clear everything up. Reluctantly, I decided to meet because I didn't want to disappoint Julia. She had no involvement in this matter, so I held no resentment towards her. She informed me that she was in my city with Susan and expressed a desire to meet soon. When I met Susan, it was initially awkward, but the conversation eventually flowed. She congratulated me on my marriage. I explained that I had to cancel her invitation because of my father's actions, and also because I suspected she might have been involved in the situation where they tried to take money from me, citing Julia's tuition and Emma's health issues as reasons. As soon as I mentioned this, Susan burst into tears and said she was unaware that my father had borrowed money from my grandfather. She then started to elaborate on what had happened. When she told me everything, I was overwhelmed by surprise and anger. It was true that Emma had been sick. There was no mistake about that part. My father had used some savings for the medical expenses, but it wasn't enough, so he told Susan he would borrow from my grandfather and promised her that he would definitely repay it. Susan said it was okay at that time. Afterward, she didn't ask him about the money again. When Emma recovered and the situation settled down, Susan was shocked to learn that my father had depleted Julia's money years ago and couldn't accept that fact. When she asked him about it, he simply explained that the money was used to repay my grandfather. Moreover, he explained that he was pressured by my grandfather at that time and had to use the money, and he told a sad story that I had offered to help with the tuition myself. Susan said that despite feeling very embarrassed about the situation, she was deeply grateful for my help. It seemed their marriage was going through a tough phase, requiring a lot of counseling and therapy. Everything started to fall apart when my grandfather told me he would give me the house and confessed he hadn't been repaid. Susan said it felt like someone had slapped her in the face. She asked my father where the money had gone. At first, my father tried to make excuses and lie, but he eventually admitted to having an affair and that the affair partner had threatened to tell Susan about it. The only way he could silence his affair partner was by paying her off. After that, he left the affair partner, and once the secret was exposed, his relationship with Susan completely ended. Since then, Susan has moved out, and they are proceeding with a divorce. She was approached by my father for reconciliation, but she emphasized that she could never forgive infidelity. During our conversation, I heard so many shocking revelations that I was left in disbelief. I didn't have the capacity to digest the facts. I was simply overwhelmed. I felt embarrassed for assuming that Susan had conspired with my father to steal money from me, especially since she too had been deceived by him. I encouraged her, and we both left the scene. Knowing the facts, I was able to reconcile with Susan. I deeply regret not inviting her to my wedding. She was completely innocent and, in fact, the most victimized person in this issue. Now, I was filled with anger and disgust. It still feels surreal that my father was a swindler and even cheated. He was truly the worst kind of person, and I no longer wanted anything to do with him. My current focus was to assist Susan and provide her with as much support as possible. Thus, I decided to charge rent to my father. Since he was still living in the same house, I told him that he needs to sign a formal lease if he wants to continue renting. The rent was set high, which will undoubtedly put him in a difficult situation, especially with the divorce underway, but it was his own doing. I've decided to split the rent between my mother and Susan. Susan has been a homemaker for so long that she now needs financial support and will likely receive a larger share. Meanwhile, my mother had worked all her life and wasn't in need of money. In fact, it was her idea to give all the money to Susan. We were not in dire need of additional income. We were satisfied with our lives and didn't need the extra money. However, Susan's situation was different, so I felt obligated to support her. She supported me while my father was absent. Even though I knew Susan would refuse the money, I insisted on giving it to her. When my father received the lease, he reacted very badly and tried to use other family members to retrieve the contract from me. Unfortunately for him, the entire family understood his issues and no longer wanted to be involved with him. He called and texted me, but I have ignored all communications while keeping a record of everything. Later, he tried to reach out through my grandfather, but my grandfather confronted him with reality. Since then, he has been quiet. He hasn't asked me to reconsider, which I believe means he understands that he can't expect more given the situation. Susan was aiming to gain full custody of Emma, but realistically, that seemed difficult at this point. Although my father was in a better position to provide financial support, proving his incompetence as a parent wasn't that easy. I don't know what will happen, but I sincerely hope that Emma can live with Susan. Susan is a wonderful mother, and I believe she will manage her relationship with Emma well. I can't say the same about her relationship with my father, but strangely enough, I can confidently say the exact opposite regarding Susan. I am 30 years old, and my younger sister, Jennifer, is 26. We do not get along, and it is unlikely that we will in the future. I cannot understand why she enjoys causing trouble for me, but her actions this time ended in failure. She has been spoiled by our parents since childhood. I am extremely perplexed about this. My parents used to focus solely on me, but as soon as Jennifer was born, I was sidelined and never regained their attention. Believe me, I truly tried my best. I worked hard to persuade them, but ever since Jennifer was born, I simply had no luck. I excelled in sports and participated in dancing, singing, and acting in school plays, but none of it impressed my parents enough to earn their attention. Everything revolved around Jennifer. It was truly bizarre. This is because, in my eyes, she did not seem to possess any remarkable talent. I may someday forgive how my parents treated me, but Jennifer was spoiled, cocky, and accustomed to being the center of attention. She could not tolerate anyone else being in the spotlight. Whenever I brought home good news from school, she would find a way to make the day about herself, and my parents allowed it. When I turned 18, during a birthday party my parents threw for me, we received a call from the police. Jennifer was drinking with friends and got caught by the police. While her friends escaped, Jennifer alone was apprehended. I expected my parents to be worried, but in reality, she faced no major consequences. The police let her off with a warning. My father, being a police officer, merely scolded her lightly when they brought her home, and no serious punishment followed. Despite ruining my party, this was not her last act of selfishness. When I got my first job at the age of 21, she came home with her boyfriend and announced her engagement to our parents. This was despite the fact that she was only 17 at the time. As a result, what should have been a special day for me turned into a celebration of her engagement instead of my new job. Once again, the spotlight was taken away from me. Personally, I felt that was the last straw. That day, I had a heated argument with Jennifer and my parents, who refused to understand my perspective and accused me of being overly sensitive and dramatic. Since then, I have not spoken to my parents. They have tried to reach out to me several times, but 9 years have passed, and I still have not talked to them. I feel that they love Jennifer far more than they love me. Jennifer has never tried to contact me. She broke off her engagement with her boyfriend just weeks after they got engaged. In the end, her actions were solely to gain attention, so I am glad I did not give her any. It is a good thing for me that she didn't reach out to me. She is a very self-centered person, and I do not want to be involved with her. Even though we have not spoken for 9 years, she might know something about my life. We see each other at family events occasionally. As such, my parents and Jennifer probably know that I am doing well. I currently live in a very nice house and constantly strive for self-improvement. I make an effort to choose and wear high-quality clothing. I do not currently have a family, nor do I plan to have one in the near future. I run my own business and spend all my income on myself. This is something I have been wanting to do for a long time, and I am very excited about it. 2 years ago, when my business became stable, I purchased a new house and moved out of the apartment I had lived in for years. I strictly instructed all my relatives not to share my address with my family, especially Jennifer, but somehow she found out. 6 days ago, in the evening, she suddenly showed up at my house and vandalized it. As I was leaving for a party, I discovered my house walls covered in horrible words sprayed in bright red paint. The walls and windows were covered with even more hateful graffiti. Who could have predicted this would happen? I stood there in shock for several minutes, trying to comprehend the scene before me. I thought about calling the police, but realized it would be pointless if this was Jennifer's doing. Even if I contacted the police, my father and Jennifer would sweep the incident under the rug, and she would only receive a warning. After understanding what I had seen, I recognized the handwriting as Jennifer's and checked the security camera footage just to be sure. Jennifer was wearing a hoodie, but that hoodie clearly identified her. The moment the camera caught a slight glimpse of her face, I was certain it was her. However, it was obvious that calling the police would be futile. My father would intervene, and she would escape accountability. This is based on past experiences. Not only from what happened on my 21st birthday, but also from rumors I've heard about her from relatives. It's not uncommon for Jennifer to take advantage of my father's connections. The reason for her behavior is obvious. Her life isn't going well. According to some people, she started a new business a few years ago, but it ended in disastrous failure, leaving her to repay debts, including those from her previous job, with help from our parents. My parents did not condone her behavior, and she had no other options. Eventually, she gave up on everything and turned to drinking and drugs. My father is fully aware of her actions. He knows all about her shady dealings and always helps her cover them up. Whenever she gets into trouble, he always bails her out. Recently, it seems that Jennifer has had a hard time accepting the fact that I have been successful. This is especially true since I appeared on the cover of a local magazine, which became a topic of conversation among our relatives. She hasn't matured much since childhood and has rarely accomplished anything on her own, so her weekly parties are no longer something she can brag about. She is also emotionally unstable. For that reason, she felt the need to damage my house and make a statement that I don't deserve the kind of recognition I've been receiving. What I'm about to say might sound cold, but part of the situation Jennifer is facing is self-inflicted. She has never been the type to work hard or dedicate herself to anything. She has always expected things to go well for her naturally, and my parents enabled that behavior. It's only natural that she ended up in this situation. When I saw the footage, I knew reporting it to the police would be pointless. This is because my father would never abandon Jennifer, no matter how difficult the situation. However, despite 9 years of no contact with me, my father chose to direct his anger at me. He wanted to protect the daughter who got into trouble, but unfortunately, that daughter was not me, it was Jennifer. After thinking long and hard, I decided to upload the video to social media to see how others would react to my father's actions. I took several photos of the words written on my exterior walls, believed it to be Jennifer's doing, and posted them on social media, though I could not report it to the police. A few hours later, comments began to surge, so I unblocked my family to let them see the post as well. Jennifer messaged me, asking me to delete the post, but I told her I would not comply. She has no authority to force me to do anything, and if she wants to take legal action, it's her responsibility to prove that the person in the video isn't her. If it comes to that, the matter will go to court. The discussion went nowhere, but honestly, she has more to lose. Even though she damaged my house, and I had to pay for repainting costs, it wasn't a significant issue for me. On the other hand, if she chooses to pursue this legally, I have the funds to cover the costs involved in court. If she wants me to delete my post, she must prove to me that the person in the video isn't her. But she can't do that. This is because the person in the video is undoubtedly her. This placed her in a very difficult position. The issue was no longer limited to her, but also involved my father and others who had been supporting her. She likely never anticipated things would escalate this far. She probably thought that if I reported it to the police, my father would intervene and everything would be swept under the rug. However, I understand the dynamics of our family very well. This time she picked the wrong person to mess with. As a result, after I sent her a message, she showed no reaction and did not reply for several days. The post remained online, visible to our acquaintances, friends, family, and even family friends. 2 days ago, she contacted me again, stating that she was prepared to pay for the repainting costs and just wanted me to call her. She asked me to delete the post, but since the issue wasn't about money for me, I ignored the financial offer and demanded that she acknowledge her actions and publicly apologize. I told her I would only consider deleting the post after she did so. At that moment, she began to plead, saying she was ready to apologize directly or in any other way I preferred, but she emphasized that she would not apologize publicly. She argued that a public apology would require her to accept responsibility for her actions, which could risk losing the clients who still supported her. It wasn't clear which clients she was worried about. She is no longer at the forefront of any business. Whenever she is asked questions about her business, she continues to deny everything, but accepting a public apology would only harm her reputation further. However, I did not care about that. I told her that this was what I wanted, and she could either comply or leave the post as it was. For me, it was a very simple choice. After I refused to negotiate, she repeatedly messaged me, trying to persuade me, but I did not feel like responding. A few hours later, my father called me. He pointed out that my post was causing serious damage not only to my sister but also to her reputation. He stressed that since she values her career, she could not afford to be derailed by such circumstances. Once again, I was strongly urged to take the post down, but I refused, which only brought further disappointment to her. If she had not acted this way towards me in the first place, I wouldn't have felt compelled to post about her actions. Despite her reputation being in jeopardy, my parents chose not to urge Jennifer to apologize publicly. Instead, they harshly reprimanded me over the phone. They accused me of being arrogant in my success, thinking I could act however I pleased and escape the consequences. As I was about to hang up, my mother began to cry and said sadly, "I never thought you would act like this." She admitted that Jennifer and I had been treated differently since childhood, but strongly criticized me for never responding to their attempts to contact me over the past 9 years. She argued that it was unfair for them to be seen as the villains in this situation. They claimed to have changed significantly as people. Ultimately, by refusing to delete the post, my father's reputation was also damaged. This has only caused further tension and friction within our family. I didn't even give my father a chance to show me how much he had changed. Now, I feel somewhat conflicted about the situation and am deeply troubled about how to navigate this difficult time, especially regarding my relationship with my parents. Despite my father's reputation already being tarnished, I have no intention of deleting the post about my sister. If my father had responded seriously, he could have undoubtedly saved her. The fact that the post further damaged her reputation was an intended outcome and precisely what I wanted. I have no regrets about not reporting the incident to the police. I am confident in my judgment regarding the type of drugs Jennifer had been using. While I don't fully know the details, it is clear that all of her actions were illegal. It wasn't just about drug dealing, it extended to other unlawful activities as well. If she had been earning money through illegal and dishonest means, that was undoubtedly a significant issue. Furthermore, my father actively helped her conceal such facts. He outwardly pretended to be an honest police officer, but in reality, his actions were far from it. Therefore, there is absolutely no reason for me to delete the post just to protect her reputation. They have repeatedly tried to contact me for legitimate reasons, but I have consistently refused their attempts. After carefully reading the comments on my post, I became convinced that there was no need to delete it. All the criticism my family is currently facing is a result of their own actions. This situation arose because of their behavior, and I am fully aware that I am not the villain in this matter. Even now, days later, the post remains on the internet. The repainting of my house is already complete, and the graffiti has been completely erased. I no longer feel it is worth waiting for my parents or sister to pay me back, and I have come to terms with that aspect of the situation. I have chosen to ignore the repeated text messages sent by my sister and have no other option but to continue doing so. What I truly want is a genuine apology from her. It should be something publicly acknowledged, and until I receive a proper apology from her via email, I have no intention of deleting the post. This is because the post has already been seen by many people and is widely recognized. All my relatives have avoided any contact with Jennifer and my parents. In fact, no one even attempts to speak with them. Most of the people we spend time with have reached out to me and informed me that Jennifer shows no signs of complying with my demands. This indicates that they understand and support my position. To me, these are completely reasonable requests, but they act as if I am demanding something unreasonable from the whole world. It is truly unfortunate, but I am no longer surprised by their behavior. They have consistently acted this way, and I have come to accept that reality over the years. The decision I made 9 years ago to distance myself from them was an excellent choice. They do not deserve to be a part of my life. Additionally, today my parents came to visit me, but they were not alone. The family lawyer accompanied them. Not only my parents but also my uncle came along, yet despite this, I did not take down the post. After my uncle threatened to file a lawsuit, they showed me the legal documents Jennifer had prepared. This was meant to demonstrate that they were serious about resolving the issue, not just making threats. However, neither the documents nor the presence of their lawyer intimidated me in any way. When I called Jennifer to join us, they made no move and simply sat there. They emphasized that deleting the ridiculous post would give me a chance to avoid a massive lawsuit and urged me to seriously consider it. When I remained silent and unresponsive, my father angrily pounded his fist on my coffee table. This was incredibly upsetting. The table was very expensive, and more importantly, I had no intention of discussing anything with my father. When Jennifer finally arrived, she continued to try to negotiate with me, repeatedly insisting that forgetting about that specific post would save us both a lot of time. However, I refused to delete it. There was no sufficient reason to forgive them, and I could no longer endure the situation. I firmly told them that I had no intention of negotiating. Frankly, I doubt they have the courage to proceed with a lawsuit. This is because if the lawsuit were initiated, it would likely drag them into even bigger problems. Meanwhile, despite my uncle's background as a trained police officer, his attempts to stop Jennifer from angrily trying to punch a hole in my wall proved utterly ineffective. Witnessing Jennifer trying to damage my house wall was an extremely frightening experience. However, what she did next after that incident only made me even angrier. She pulled a large amount of cash out of her wallet, threw it on my coffee table, and said, "Let me know if you need more before walking out." This was unbelievably unpleasant and extremely disrespectful behavior. In light of this incident, I have decided to address the matter through the internet. I am now seriously considering filing a restraining order against my family. I am confident that I have ample grounds to take such a step. Especially after today's events, I am convinced that legal action would be highly beneficial. It is extremely important to uncover what truths my family has been hiding. At this point, everyone should understand just how despicable the individuals I am dealing with are. They are truly the worst, and because of that, I am genuinely looking forward to fighting them. I believe you can also understand the wickedness of the individuals I have described through this writing. I was honestly surprised that she would resort to such behavior. Perhaps she is jealous of the clearly superior life I am currently enjoying compared to hers. I am a successful business person, while she has been involved in the illegal sale of drugs, and our lifestyles are fundamentally different. She throws parties every weekend, but compared to my fulfilling lifestyle, hers is insignificant, and not everyone praises her actions. When I met my parents again after the courtroom hearing, they outwardly appeared very friendly, but I couldn't believe such a swift reconciliation could occur. Especially since my father had revealed the shocking fact to my sister that he was going to cut her out of his life. True reconciliation seemed unlikely. I now realize that not giving my parents another chance and following my intuition was the right decision. They are truly people unworthy of respect. When the verdict is handed down, I hope for an outcome unfavorable to them, and it currently seems to be heading in that direction. I am confident in my ability to handle this matter and prepared to address everything that has happened. I feel great joy that the necessary resolutions have been achieved. I have only recently come to deeply understand how much anger and frustration my family's negative influence has caused me. I am not entirely sure if this approach is the most effective, but at the very least I am facing my emotions head-on, and I take pride in that process and strongly believe in its success. Although legal proceedings were expected to take time, the conclusion came far more quickly than anticipated. Thanks to surveillance footage and the testimonies of many people through social media, my sister's illegal activities were exposed one after another. She was found guilty not only of vandalism but also of long-term drug dealing, ultimately receiving a 4-year prison sentence. My father's involvement in covering up misconduct within the police force was revealed, resulting in the loss of his job. My mother is currently receiving mental support, and her condition is gradually improving. The content I posted received an unexpectedly large response, garnering widespread support as a call-out of abuse of power and corruption. Since I hadn't anticipated such developments, I feel that my decision to make the truth public was the right one. Even now, I remain focused on managing my company, and business is thriving. While my relationship with my sister and parents is not yet at a stage of reconciliation, I feel a sense of accomplishment in facing the issues they caused head-on. I am a 25-year-old woman with a sister who is 3 years younger than me. My 22-year-old sister is currently 6 months pregnant. We were raised by our mother alone after losing our father when I was 14. Life when my father was alive was something we could manage to get through. My mother clearly favored my sister, and my father, noticing this, tried to bridge the gap by supporting me. Just as my sister was precious to my mother, I was special to my father. After my father passed away, the balance within our family was further disrupted. Although we had grandparents, they didn't live with us and were not deeply involved in our daily lives. Moreover, my father's parents had already passed away when he was young, so we had little connection to his side of the family. My maternal grandparents visited often and we spent time together, but they never lived with us. My mother clearly told her parents that she wanted to live only with her children. While she didn't mind occasional visits, she was against living together with them. This stemmed from my mother's desire to maintain her independence and freedom. However, she couldn't claim to be truly independent as she was still relying on financial support from her parents. My father was a veterinarian and financially well off, so my mother stopped working after giving birth to us. After my father's death, my mother got a sales job through my grandfather's connections, and I thought she supported the household on her own. But I recently discovered that she had been receiving financial help from my grandfather all along. It feels contradictory that she rejected living together with them while readily accepting money from them. After my father's death, my mother treated me coldly. I always felt emotionally distanced and isolated, yet I was not allowed to leave the house. Moving in with my grandparents was an option, but I don't think my mother would have permitted it. When that thought crossed my mind and I blamed my mother's attitude, her affection turned entirely toward my sister. During arguments, when I said, "I'll live with my grandparents," my mother emotionally manipulated me. Being young at the time, I ended up staying under her control. That period was truly painful. Not only did my mother favor my sister, but my sister was aware of it and often took advantage of the situation. Whenever something went wrong, I was always the one blamed, while my sister escaped any punishment. The treatment we received as siblings was completely different. I think this is why she developed a completely different personality from mine. When I graduated from college and got my first job, I finally felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. I was earning my own income and no longer needed to live with my mother. As soon as I saved enough money, I moved out of my family home. Since then, I've kept my distance from my family and have truly enjoyed the freedom. For the past 2 years, I've been living with Andrew, whom I met during my university days. We started dating a while ago and decided to live together 2 years ago. He was truly my life partner. We got married about 3 weeks ago, but sadly I lost him just a few days later. He died in a work-related accident. It's still painful to talk about, but it was a completely unexpected tragedy, and I still can't come to terms with it. There is no doubt that he was an irreplaceable presence in my life and my soulmate. Because of that, I can't even imagine living without him. Losing him just as we decided to walk through life together feels like my heart is being torn apart. It is truly unbearable pain. My mother has been there for me, visiting my home every day after the funeral, which has been a great help. However, I had no idea that she had something important to ask of me. About a week ago, my mother visited me. After some casual conversation, she brought up the main topic. She asked if my pregnant sister could live in my house now that Andrew is gone. My sister is unmarried but is pregnant with her boyfriend's child. She had been living with my mother, but as the baby's due date approaches, she has started to consider living with her boyfriend. It would be more convenient for them to live together. However, she had already set her sights on my home and showed no intention of finding a new place. My house is conveniently located near her boyfriend's workplace, the neighborhood has a good reputation, and the mortgage is not prohibitively expensive. To be honest, it's an ideal location for them, and I can understand why my sister likes the house. It seems she had decided this house was perfect from the moment she decided to live with her boyfriend. Although she intended to talk to me about it, she hesitated due to Andrew's death, unsure of the timing. Recently, my mother and sister discussed how Andrew's absence left enough space in the house. They thought that if I was willing, I could allow them to stay with me until I found a new home. That being said, they seemed eager to move in as soon as possible. According to my mother, my sister and her boyfriend assumed I would easily agree to give up the house. Moreover, the way they phrased it made it sound as if letting them move in, while I stayed here grieving, was somehow a favor to me. The fact that they didn't approach me directly and instead had my mother deliver the request was infuriating enough. On top of that, they tried to justify the idea by claiming the house now had extra space since my husband was gone. It was an incredibly insensitive thought, one that no reasonable person would even consider voicing. When my mother brought up the topic, I was dumbfounded. I had believed that she was looking after me out of genuine care and concern. But in that moment, I realized she had been watching over me only to advance this plan. I was deeply angry, but I tried not to show it. Calmly, I asked my mother why my sister and her boyfriend hadn't approached me directly. She replied that they felt my sister was too exhausted from her pregnancy to have a serious conversation with me. She also explained that they understood the request was complicated to bring up. I then asked why they assumed it was natural for me to give up my house. My mother answered that she had simply expected me to agree without questioning it. As I pondered this, my mother added that she and my sister thought it would be emotionally difficult for me to continue living in the house full of memories of Andrew. Hearing this deeply pained me. I felt that my mother's explanation was nothing more than an excuse. In reality, I realized they were simply being self-centered, assuming I would naturally accept their wishes. Even so, I calmly told her, I have no intention of accepting that proposal, and made it clear that I intended to stay in this house. This house is a precious place for me. I expected some argument, but my mother said nothing and left. I thought they had understood, but I was wrong. The next day, my mother came back, this time with my sister. They said I was still struggling to come to terms with my husband's death. However, my sister insisted that my house was truly the ideal place for her to live with her boyfriend. She claimed that, despite being mentally and physically exhausted, she had come all this way to convey this to me. She desperately wanted to move into this house. Then, she told me that I didn't have to leave the house. She proposed that we could share it together instead. Without pausing to consider how insensitive they were, they went on about how she was looking forward to enjoying things like playing sports with her boyfriend under the same roof. Additionally, they mentioned their plan to get married after the baby was born, claiming they needed this house and my support. She continued trying to convince me, using her pregnancy as a reason, but it was utterly absurd. Despite the fact that I was still grieving the loss of my husband, they seemed completely devoid of any consideration for my feelings. Lacking the energy to argue further, I reiterated that I had no intention of leaving this house anytime soon. I explained that I was still processing my emotions and had many procedures to handle. However, instead of respecting my opinion, they expressed their dissatisfaction and said, "You're so selfish. But we'll be back," before leaving. I was surprised, but I didn't have the energy to argue, so I left it alone. However, a few days later, my sister and her boyfriend suddenly showed up at my house. They came with large bags in tow, boldly entered, and made themselves at home without permission. They simply said, "We'll be living here starting today." I was stunned. Despite my refusal, they brought their belongings without my consent. Moreover, my sister had made a spare key without my permission and had moved their things in while I was away. When I learned this, I was at a loss for words. They acted as if they were the rightful owners of the house. I considered calling the police, but I didn't want to have my pregnant sister arrested, so I decided to take another approach. I had a lawyer prepare documents that appeared similar to a standard rental agreement, but included ownership transfer clauses. My sister, who was unwell due to her pregnancy, didn't carefully review the contents of the document. She asked, "This is just our rental agreement, right?" I didn't answer clearly and only nodded vaguely. Without reading the fine print, she and her boyfriend signed the documents. The document contained terms related to a rental agreement, but also included clauses about assuming the mortgage debt and transferring ownership of the property. As a result, they signed a legally binding contract. After that, I packed my belongings and left, allowing them to use the house. This wasn't out of kindness, but because I knew they would continue causing problems until I agreed. It was a measure to avoid further conflict. There were other ways I could have defended the house, but honestly, I didn't have the energy to pursue them. The main reason, however, was that I planned to sell the house within a few months. Since losing Andrew, I had been planning to move to another state, so there was no reason for me to stay. I started looking for jobs out of state. I could have revoked the rental agreement and evicted them out of spite, but in the end, I didn't. I was already in a difficult situation myself, so I chose to avoid further trouble. I considered staying in a hotel temporarily, but with so much luggage, I decided to visit my grandfather's house instead. My grandmother passed away 3 years ago after a long illness. Since then, my grandfather had been living alone. He sold his old house and purchased a new one in the suburbs, slightly removed from the town. It was a convenient location for me as well. Unlike my mother, my grandfather understood my situation and genuinely cared for me. He was unaware of my mother, sister, and her boyfriend's attempts to pressure me into giving up my house after Andrew's death. When I arrived at his home with my belongings and explained everything, it was the first time he learned about the situation. To be honest, I had no intention of starting a fight. I simply wanted him to listen to my story with an open mind. I felt that giving up the house was my decision to make. I told my grandfather about my plans to move and asked if I could stay with him in the meantime. He listened to me and was visibly upset, saying he couldn't believe how insensitive my mother and sister had been. I thought that since I had willingly given up the house, it wasn't that big of an issue. My grandfather repeatedly said that their insensitivity and lack of concern for anyone but themselves was a serious issue. I hadn't fully thought through this situation. Because, for me, losing my husband felt like the most significant event of my life. And then, I decided to take revenge on my sister and her boyfriend. This wasn't a rational decision, but simply a result of my anger toward them. First, I stopped paying the mortgage. When I consulted my grandfather, he understood my decision and advised, "It's no longer your house, so there's no need for you to continue paying." However, he did explain the impact it would have on my credit score. As expected, 2 months later, the bank sent a notice demanding payment. My sister and her boyfriend panicked at the unexpected situation, and my mother angrily called me. "How could you do this to your family?" But my resolve was firm. Why should I pay the mortgage for people who are illegally occupying my house? I answered calmly. As a result, they were forced to leave the house 3 months later. This incident left an irreparable rift in our family relationships, but I have no regrets. My credit score was indeed affected, but my grandfather offered to help with the down payment for a new house. Andrew would surely be proud of this decision. My grandfather encouraged me. I'm sure he would have wanted me to stand up for my rights. While my sister and mother continue to criticize me, many other relatives understand my position. Through this experience, I've learned that sometimes it's necessary to protect your own rights, even if it means hurting loved ones. Now, I live in a new house, cherishing the memories I have of Andrew and moving forward positively. Losing the house was a significant cost, but I feel that preserving my dignity was far more valuable. Moreover, my grandfather felt that it was time to teach them a lesson. The method he chose was to completely cut off financial support to my mother. As a result, it became clear that my mother had not only relied on my grandfather's money to raise us, but was still dependent on him for her living expenses. This was because she couldn't manage to cover her living costs on her own. I explained my mother's situation to my grandfather in detail. Afterward, he said he intended to take responsibility and deal with the matter, but I assumed he would simply talk to her directly. However, shortly after, I received countless messages from my mother and sister accusing me of being cruel and acting deliberately. So I asked my grandfather directly what he had done. He explained that everything he did was for my mother's benefit. We grew up with the support of our grandparents. My father, knowing he was sick and that he would pass away, left us some money before he died. Our grandparents did everything they could to support us and decided to protect us until we safely turned 18. It was a wise decision. Otherwise, I would have had to take care of my grandparents, and abandoning them would never have been an option. However, my grandfather felt that he had done enough for my mother and that it was time for her to start doing something for herself. My grandfather felt that if he didn't take action, my mother would become even more dependent on him, more assertive and increasingly callous. His decision was not wrong. In fact, what happened to me afterward proves it. Regarding my grandfather cutting off financial support to my mother and sister, I felt there was no particular problem, because I knew my grandfather had supported them for many years. However, my mother began tagging other family members on social media, spreading the idea that I had manipulated my grandfather to turn him against her and my sister, intending to exclude them. None of these claims were based on fact. My grandfather knew I hadn't done anything. This came entirely from his own sense of moral responsibility, and my mother and sister didn't see it as a particular issue. Their attacks on social media left me deeply troubled about how to deal with the hatred from my own family. Every time I saw the flood of messages, I wondered if I had made the wrong choice. When thinking about how to handle this, I considered that the best way might be to apologize to them and ask my grandfather to resume supporting them. However, I don't feel that would be appropriate or truly the right thing to do. Even so, I am unsure how to move forward from here. First and foremost, I gave up the house simply because I didn't want to fight with my family. It wasn't because I felt disrespected. I feel they need to understand that things don't always go the way they want. Looking back, if Andrew were still alive, I probably would have avoided this kind of conflict with my family. I felt disputes with my family weren't worth it. Some people may side with my mother, but my grandparents were different. When I was little, they always stood by me, supported my feelings, and even offered to let me live with them or stand against my mother if I wanted. My grandparents always did their best for me from a young age. However, my grandfather didn't tell me that he had been financially supporting my mother and sister until recently. This situation is somewhat complicated, influenced by the fact that my mother was their only child. As a child, my mother was quite spoiled by my grandparents. While they felt responsible for this, they didn't think much of it, assuming she would become independent as she grew up. However, their expectations were off, and my mother never became self-reliant. My grandparents tried in every way to help her become independent. Even so, they couldn't fully distance themselves from her or cut off financial support, as they were heavily dependent on her in some ways. My grandfather admitted that he felt he had been in a weak position and didn't know how to explain it, making it hard for him to say no to my mother. However, after the recent events involving me, he decided not to contact my mother directly to ask about the situation. While my mother did respond to them, nothing more came of it, and I have no intention of issuing a statement to defend myself. Honestly, I don't care about that anymore. I just wanted to feel a sense of healing in my heart. I want to cherish my own life. I have no desire to engage with people who spread rumors and claim their own righteousness meaninglessly. At first, I wrote that I wanted to live with my grandfather while working out of state, and that goal is progressing well. The commotion caused by the series of posts made by my mother and sister has also settled down, and I no longer hear from my family. This is thanks to the few people who spoke to me directly and understood the truth, then shared my story with others. Some people have apologized to me, while others haven't, but that's not important to me. In a few weeks, everything will be over, and I'd like to bring this chapter to a close. There are still a few people who, knowing I'm in a difficult situation, insist that I should have given up the house. It's been some time since I lost my husband, and during that time, many people have supported me and declared they would no longer speak to my mother or sister. I am truly grateful for their support. It brings me genuine joy to know that there are still people with the kindness to stand up for what is right. Of course, my grandfather has also been watching over my actions, repeatedly telling me how difficult it must have been to make those decisions. I just wanted to return home and find comfort in familiar surroundings, but the company that hired me offered a good salary, so I decided to work hard in a new place. Additionally, I wanted to keep myself busy with work to heal from what had happened and forget about the time. I stay in touch with friends, my grandfather and Andrew's parents, and I meet with them from time to time. Now, I feel proud of myself for working hard to build a better life for myself. I intend to achieve everything Andrew and I dreamed of together, and I will enjoy life to the fullest, even for the part Andrew couldn't experience. I will live a life that he would be proud of. I'm determined to do my very best,